Hey, finally. Okay. This is The End of History by Hanno Sauer in Inquiry Journal. There we go. So, yeah, as always, ask questions if you want. Feel free. This is an open access paper. Let me drop the link in chat for anyone who wants it. And you can always type exclamation point paper and you'll get the link back. So, here we go. Yeah, the end of history. What in common language is called old time ought be called young or early time. As between individual and individual living at the same time and in the same situation, he who is old possesses as such more experience than he who is young. As between generation and generation, the reverse of this is true. If, as in ordinary language, a preceding generation be with reference to a succeeding generation called old, the old or preceding generation could not have had so much experience as the succeeding. With respect to such of the materials or sources of wisdom which have come under the cognizance of their own senses, the two are on par. With respect to such of those materials and sources of wisdom as are derived from the reports of others, the later of the two possesses an indisputable advantage. In giving the name of old or elder to the earlier generations of the two, the misrepresentation is not less gross nor the folly of it less incontestable than if the name of old man or old woman were given to the infant in its cradle. What then is the wisdom of the times called old? It is the wisdom of the gray hairs? No, it is the wisdom of the cradle. Jeremy Bentham, The Book of Fallacies, Part 1, Chapter 2. That was cutesy. I hadn't read that before. I have not heard that from Bentham. Very cute. I mean, clearly it's just wrong, which is hilarious. I mean, it just plays on what you mean by old. Later in time is like what you mean by like the newer generations later in time. So it's like older in terms of the history of the earth. Older in terms of your life is what the older generation is. I mean, it's like, how bad of a fucking conflation are you making there, Bentham? Come on, man. Like, yeah. And of course, the younger generation gets the benefit of exactly, Vipers. Like, seriously. And you know, I forgot again what I was saying. I was like laughing at Viper's comment, but yeah, it's like, how bad do you want to conflate things here? I was gonna say, oh yeah, of course, the later generations have the benefit of like things that were learned earlier by the earlier generations, and so they have a leg up getting started. But when they start out, they don't know anything. They just have a leg up compared to anyone else, given that the knowledge is passed on. Okay. Anywho, introduction. Imagine a tiny island somewhere far away. The island only has a few million inhabitants. I mean, that ain't so tiny if you got a few million on it, but okay. They have no modern technology, no scientific knowledge of contemporary physics or biology or astronomy or psychology, no real mathematics or logic, and perhaps worst of all, no internet. Oh, the horror. Well, you have internet. Many of the people on the island have never talked to each other and they never will. Indeed, many are unaware of what the world outside of the island is like, or that such a world exists at all. But they do engage in philosophical thinking, and sometimes they write their thoughts down. See, again, this is weird to begin with. Like, they do engage in philosophical thinking, but they've already said there is no real math or logic. In that case, what are you doing in philosophy if you have no logic? Like, that doesn't, like, really, I don't understand. Okay, but it's a nice start. It's very nice. I mean, we got this cute thing from Bentham, and this is a cute little way to start off. Just imagine a group of people that are just sort of living their lives, and everything's cool without any of our modern stuff. Okay, meanwhile, the rest of the world outside of the island spends a disproportionate amount of time studying the writings of the islanders, scouring them for hidden insights and important and thus far undiscovered truths which they hope to recover by pondering what the islanders, many which are notorious for indulging in a rather hermetic style, may have meant. Oh, I see what we're doing here. Okay, fine. Yes, we're going to call the island ancient Greece. Fine. Comparatively speaking, the rest of the world spends a disproportionately small amount of time thinking about the extra insular world, which contains orders of magnitude more people with all the latest knowledge at their disposal and what they have to say. When you point this out to them, they become defensive and insist that what the islanders have to say really is that good, usually much better and more insightful at any rate than what anyone from the rest of the world, perhaps with some exceptions, tends to produce. This is an odd situation. It is intertemporal. Its intertemporal equivalent, I want to suggest, is the situation we are actually in. The tiny island far away is the history of philosophy, and we are paying too much attention to it. All right, I want to smack these people already. Seriously. Like, the idea that smart people are wasting their time on ancient philosophy is like, all right, maybe the reason I'm angry is because I was like this when I was younger. I was like, why are we dealing with the old ideas? Isn't our logic so much better now? Isn't our science so much better now? Haven't we benefited what we can from them? And like, if you want to like bang your head against the wall, you can go read them if you want. But like, how are they doing anything more than like what we have? Because there's been 2,000 years of, people thinking about this. We should have, run out of ideas by now. Unfortunately, or fortunately for that matter, thought is not linear. Yeah, exactly. Okay, boom. Yeah. Thought is not linear. It's not like this is positivistic thinking that like everything builds on itself. That's not how it is. It just isn't. I'm telling you, like, I can't really explain it to you saying like if you don't recognize it, Cinesemiotics, welcome in. The idea that thought just like builds on itself and just like sort of grows, that's not how human thinking is. It goes off in directions you don't expect, and it's not like it just keeps getting bigger. It goes off left, it goes right, it goes off in some other direction we had never even thought about. And so it's not like this. And this is like, I'm already like, this is my position here, and I can explain it better, but I'm just saying right now, I'm telling you, this is like where they've gone wrong already. Okay. Yeah, I mean, one doesn't just read the ancients. Well, one doesn't just walk to whatever that thing is in Lord of the Rings either. You still do it because thoughts are unpredictable. That's the point. You're like, oh shit, I ain't never seen a thought like that. And it's like awesome, and you're like, this is an awesome thought. So yes. I was on this alternate site, video site, and it was trying to be like a YouTube competitor. It's called Odyssey. I don't know if it's still around, but it was meant to be like a legit site. And they were like, if someone's posting like things that are TOS, tell us. We want to, we don't have the moderation skills or the technology to, moderate all of the internet. So we're going to rely on our users to, tell us when something breaks TOS, like every other service. So, I was getting like some spam, and I was like, tell that in. Then, I was getting porn spam at some of it. And then one dude was sending out porn spam, but oh my God, was it good? And I did not report him. I was like, you know what? If this guy wants to send out this level of porn spam, like, I don't care. Talking of thoughts. I was like, that's fine. It was just so high quality. I'm like, where are you getting your stuff, dude? Okay. Alright, in this paper, I argue that studying the history of philosophy is philosophically unhelpful. The epistemic aims of philosophy, if there are any... What the fuck do you know about the epistemic aims of philosophy, my friend? Are largely frustrated by engaging with the history of philosophy. So, the idea that we have ideas what we're doing, and the history of philosophy is fucking us up. That's interesting, but stupid. Interesting, but stupid. Okay, my claim is that we can learn surprisingly little about philosophical problems by studying the works of the great historical philosophers such as Aristotle, Hegel, or Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein, there are people who are alive who still remember him. This is not like historical in the sense of like Aristotle or Hegel who have been dead hundreds if not thousands of years. People still know Wittgenstein. Like, there are people who probably met him when they were a kid. So that's, again, weird. Okay. Examples for philosophical problems are, what is knowledge and how do we acquire it? What constitutes a just society? How does the human mind work? Yeah, Valpo. I mean, Wittgenstein, it seems like... what counts as what counts as history here? Like anything like older than 50 years? Because he died in 1953. 1953 is like, yeah, 70 years ago or something. But yeah, there's plenty of 90. There aren't plenty. There are at least some 90-year-olds who could have been in school studying with him at that point. You remember Frankenstein? Well, you are much older than us and a little scarier, Vipers. Because I was 1800s or 1860s. I forget when that Mary Shelley was writing. Okay, how does the human mind work? What are natural laws? Where does linguistic meaning come from? Becoming acquainted with the history of philosophy contributes very little to improving our understanding of those problems and their potential solutions, so we would be better off doing much less of it. I mean, is this a parody art like beginning where it's like they're gonna go into how all the history of philosophy is like dumb, but that actually, in the end flips, that becomes much more important? I mean, maybe that's what they're doing here. I don't think it is. This paper has 5 sections. 1. Discusses some anti-historicist forebears. And 2. I show that extant defenses of philosophical historiography have largely fallen short of justifying the historicist approach specifically enough. In many cases, the benefits allegedly produced by studying philosophy could also be provided by studying complicated texts more generally or studying the history of philosophy, albeit much more rarely, and by focusing less on the usual suspects. 3 argues that we have good reason for thinking that historical authors were not equipped with the theoretical sophistication nor the empirical knowledge required for their writings to still be relevant to contemporary debates. All right, I just want to, I have to stop right here. This is coming off as like someone, like the less you know that you know nothing. The less you know, the less you know it. You do not understand how sophisticated some of this shit is until you really get into it. What's his name? It was Avicenna. Avicenna is a classic medieval, I forget what exactly when, logician. He did logic. He's from, I forget where, was it in Egypt or something? The texts are now in Egypt. I mean, he was writing in like Arabic or something. He was using quantifiers differently than like anyone else. He may have had quantifiers back in like 1300 or whatever the fuck he was talking about. The fact that you don't think that like people, you can dig into texts and find shit like this, like you don't understand what you were talking about. Like you don't have the theoretical sophistication. You telling me someone who had like quantifiers was using quantifier logic back in the day, even though it was slightly different, but still quantifier logic, which we didn't have until the fucking 1890s or whatever, or 1880s, like 400 years later. It's like you're just factually incorrect because you don't know the history of logic. Okay. Rage-inducing paper. In 4, I show that we have no reason for thinking that the distribution of philosophical talent and competence should be skewed in favor of the past, as is commonly assumed. Well, I don't. Who commonly assumes that? It's just this philosophical talent is just spread out over time. Not there just is more people in the past. 5. Provide a brief sketch of how the history of philosophy became epistemically overrated and why it would likely continue to be. There are various defenses of the history of philosophy in the literature, but I am not aware of any systematic contribution summarizing the case against history. This paper is supposed to fill this gap. This I'm not against. I'm not against someone arguing against history. That's fine. But I'm not arguing against history when someone doesn't seem to understand that you can still dig for gold and find it. And maybe they're going to say, okay, you can dig for gold and find it, but it's like too rare. Possible. But like stupid, but possible, you could say that. Okay, a brief history of anti-historicism. The anti-historicist thesis I defend has its own history. Rumor has it that a sign on Gilbert Harmon's office door at Princeton said, "History of philosophy, just say no," borrowing a slogan first championed by Nancy Reagan in the war on drugs. Note, the war on drugs was a terrible failure, and Just Say No did not failed also. In the Just Say No campaign, places where the war on drugs and the DARE thing actually increased drug use. So, again, they don't know what they're talking about in this case. The author doesn't. How many promising young minds, the suggestion seems to be, have succumbed to the devious lure of Nietzsche's aphorisms only to find themselves unable to stop and after years of using tragically end up as full-blown Leibniz experts. Well, I mean, at least this person has a sense of humor. At roughly the same time, the German philosopher Herbert Schnadelbach, I don't know how to say that, I apologize, spoke contemptuously of morbus hermeticus, a philosophical affliction endemic mostly to continental philosophy departments that led those who suffered from it to pretend that by engaging in philosophy and exegesis, they were somehow playing a pivotal role in the very unfolding of world history. What I'll take away from this, Barbra Streisand sold drugs. What? I mean, is that the Streisand effect, or I don't know what? Semiac says, the Odyssey by Homer has been discovered to have a perfectly accurate star chart by textual placement that was usable for navigation if you knew how to read it. It's probably no secret, just forgotten when other technologies replaced it. See, this is the sort of thing. There are old technologies that were lost for a long time. And like, this is the same thing with philosophy. Ideas like this get lost. You don't actually, you can still dig for philosophy. Yeah, so when you came across that paper, you were stunned. Yeah, like, this is the thing. There are weird things that you don't realize. I remember someone, maybe it was a Mythbusters or something. There was supposedly some certain stones that would always point due north, and they actually found. Oh, it is stunning. It is just stunning generally. Like, things people have discovered a long time ago. We don't exactly know how anything happened in the ancient world that actually point north. What they found were stones that they don't think that the people actually did it. They think it was a myth, but they found stones that actually acted like the myth because the stones had a certain polarization in their crystal structure. And so you could point the stones up and light would only go through it pointing in certain directions. And it was like, okay, you could always find the sun, depending on like using the stones. And it was like in cloudy days, you could still know where the sun was by the polarization of the light. And it's like someone was saying that there were stones that could do this, and they don't believe they did it, but like maybe 3,000 years ago, people were still able to like figure this out. Possible. Don't know. Okay. But yeah, you can go look. I'm sure if Shane were here, like the history of like stuff is just great. Oh my God. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but we've got some very loud thunder. Okay. Oh yeah, happy Jewish New Year to anyone who celebrates the Jewish New Year. Okay, some have suspected that the unusually strong focus philosophy has on its own history can at least in part be explained away psychologically. Cinesemiac says, no, Viper's Gratitude says, yeah, but your uninitiated explanation of it is more sophisticated than, hey, look at these weird rocks. Yeah. Cinesemiac says, let me just plug this. 2001: A Space Odyssey was made with Kubrick's thorough knowledge of the subject, and the film hides its secrets too in plain sight. Lumpy, what's up? What's up? How you doing? Yeah. Yeah, we're reading this paper on how the history of philosophy is stupid, and you shouldn't be doing it because it's bad for you. So yeah, let me know. But I'm just sort of laughing as we're going through this because I just think this person, this is one of these cases where the person doesn't know what they're talking about. They know enough to be dangerous. That's exactly what it is. They don't actually know what they should know, but they know enough to be dangerous, and like that is always a very scary thing. It's like, yeah, I know enough to be dangerous in certain areas. Yeah, thank you, Valpo. Okay. Some history will come in the back door of the problem courses, so be it. But don't be a slave to the fact that most of your faculty know a great deal about the history of philosophy and hence A, find it easy to teach, and B, tend to rationalize its importance. Like the formal logic requirement, this is all too often a case of those who went through a fraternity initiation or Marine boot camp needing to justify the hardship, or their own idiosyncratic taste by generalizing about its necessity. The test of a good major is that he or she or they do good philosophy, not good history of philosophy. Excuse me. Few great philosophers are noted for their work in the history of philosophy, and many were deficient or disinterested in it. They were into the problems. Let it be at least a matter for investigation whether the history requirements are necessary. They certainly are a barrier. Yes, exactly. Cinemax. When someone watches one documentary or two documentaries, or they read something on the internet and then they think they're they've done a little bit of work, but they don't really understand the subject. I always want to note something about this. There is a good point in this little section. the modern academic business of teaching philosophy, you need to have requirements to satisfy the business folks. And so what do you teach to satisfy the business folks? Well, you can't teach what good you can't measure what good philosophy is. That's not an easy thing to measure in terms of numbers. What you can do is give tests on the history of philosophy. And so that is quantifiable when, like, you say, oh, does this person understand this theory of like Hume or Kant? You can give a test on that. You can ask multiple choice questions. You can have them write a question about write an essay about the categorical imperative, and that looks at least somewhat objective. And so it's not just that people are like, oh, I did this so you're gonna do this, but like, yes, easy to teach and also quantifiable for the modern academic business requirements. And so I'd put a C in here, and that's one of the reasons I think that it probably has, a place in the modern university, is because, Dunning-Kruger effect, the less you know, the less you know it, is that because it's a business decision, because it's easy to justify. It's like, oh, what does the philosophy department do? It makes sure that the kids have a sense of the history of thought. And like, you can do that with the great history courses, that's fine, but like, you can also do that within a philosophy thing, and that is easily justifiable. Why do you have a job? Well, these people teach the kids the history of the great ideas, which is something, good to know, like, in general. Okay. Okay, so this could explain why philosophy has such a strong historical focus, and this much is true. Philosophy is, at least in part, a humanistic discipline dedicated to preserving the cultural heritage of humanity and sustaining our ability to comprehend a body of difficult texts whose content may fade into oblivion without such stewardship. This is an entirely legitimate endeavor that I won't have anything to object to in this paper. Okay, yeah, so they don't have a problem with history here. That's fine. Because they're not arguing against history. They're just saying history isn't philosophy. That's true. But how do you actually do philosophy? And they're going to say it not through history. Well, why? I mean, why isn't that one way to do it? All right. However, the author says, philosophy is not only a humanistic discipline, and as far as the part that focuses on the substantive problems is concerned, how to understand time or virtue or God, a striking and frequently noticed asymmetry remains. The history of most scientific disciplines, while interesting, plays little or no role in how those disciplines conduct their business today. Physics is not taught or practiced by reading and interpreting Newton's Principia Mathematica Philosophiae Naturalis. Geometry is not done by studying Euclid's Elements, and so on. There may be some sort of fundamental difference between philosophy and physics or chemistry that accounts for this fact. The point is that historicists of philosophy owe us an explanation of what that difference is and why, in philosophy, things should stand so differently. Yeah, right. What is philosophy? Well, that's fair. Like, and separating it from history is like, why does philosophy separate from history? Like, that's a good question. And they're saying, well, why does philosophy... Now they're saying, what is justifying the looking at the history of philosophy to actually do philosophy if you're not doing history? That's a fine question. Okay. Author says, to be perfectly clear, my aim is not that we should not be doing history of philosophy. There are all kinds of reasons why reading and talking about the Critique of Pure Reason or the Republic are worthwhile. Studying these seminal texts is an inherently interesting intellectual pursuit. Reading them is often tremendously enjoyable, and familiarity with these texts can be very valuable to intellectual historians for the insights into culture, knowledge, and morality they may contain. Yeah, so they're saying here, it might be expedient in different areas, but not philosophy. But like, to do philosophy, you don't need to know the history of philosophy. To understand how we ended up in the place we are today, then you do have to know history. But like, that's not in question. There are thus many excellent reasons to engage with the history of philosophy. This is the history of big ideas, and like, why the ideas that have shaped human history. And like, they're not arguing there, but yeah. Gaining traction on the aforementioned philosophical problems, however, is not one of them. This means that I am not arguing against the historians of philosophy and what they do, but against what could be called philosophical historicists, that is, those who seek to think that at least one good method of thinking about knowledge or justice is to study what historical authors have written about knowledge and justice a long time ago. This, I argue, is a mistake. Ultimately, I advocate for a version of triumphant anachronism. If we want to do good philosophy today, knowledge of yesterday's good philosophy is not going to help us very much. Lumpy says, the history of philosophy is the material because the old concepts are totally nullified by new concepts. In chemistry, by concepts, the earlier atomic models were wrong, so we don't need to dwell on them. The old concepts are not nullified. I was going to say, yeah, that seems like you missed a negation in there. Yeah, that's going to be it. And the author hasn't got, no, Lumpy, that's a great point, and I'm expecting the author to address that exact point, because it is going to be like something they're going to have to argue against, because that's really strong. And so the idea like that they're just going to gloss over that, like they're going to have to answer that question. Viper's saying, so he's saying that insight can be had from backwards engineering what we know now using logic rather than learn how current body of knowledge naturally pseudo-randomly developed. I think that's kind of what's going to happen. They're saying our tools are better now, and we could just we're going to get enough of the understanding from our better logic, which is going to be a better tool to begin with now, and therefore we're going to start in a better position if we don't take on the baggage of the old shit. So if we don't take on our old baggage, then we're just going to be in a better position using our contemporary thoughts and logic and concepts, which are therefore how we're going to move forward. Just dump the baggage. Okay. Author says, a stronger version of this anachronistic thesis would have it that studying the history of philosophy is not just philosophically insignificant, but positively harmful. Everything we do has an opportunity cost. By deciding to do A, we are therefore deciding not to do B, so that every minute I spend reading Spinoza, I could be reading a recent paper with a novel and better argument. This stronger version of anti-historicism is not what I am after here. Okay, they're not saying, they're not after this for some reason. Let's see, wait. Okay, so they're not saying it's harmful. That's not what they're saying. They're going with they just don't think it's useful. Author says, moreover, I will limit my argument to the question of how to do philosophical research, leaving the issue of how to best teach philosophy aside. In fact, one could argue that studying authors with obscure, obsolete, and difficult to comprehend views is especially useful for sharpening students' hermeneutical skills and training their interpretive abilities. I actually suspect that historical authors should play a smaller role in our philosophical education as well, but I am not taking a stand on this here. So they're saying, okay, so it might have pedagogical uses to look at older authors too. That's fine, but the author's not talking about that. I wonder if this is a Hanno. I feel like I want to call him a he, but I don't know if it's a he or she or they. Who endorses historicism? It is hard to find this approach defended explicitly in print, largely I suspect because people do not see the need to explicitly defend methodological assumptions which aren't felt to require any defense, not ant-defense. People rarely justify what appears obvious to them, but implicit assumptions can be criticized as well, and the practice of dealing with and relying on the history of philosophy that I focus on in this paper will be familiar and recognizable to many readers. We see this implicit assumption at work all the time. Christine Korsgaard develops her arguments for the inescapability of categorical moral demands largely by relying on Kant's work, and the systematic ambitions of Robert Brandam's recent A Spirit of Trust are largely fleshed out in dialogue with Hegel's phenomenology of spirit. Yeah, this was a suggested paper, Lumpy, by Valpo. So I don't normally do anything this long, but it was a suggested paper, and it's a fun topic, so I agreed to read it. But yeah, it's not short. So let's actually see. I'm on right at the end of page 5. Where are we actually getting to? Yeah, we're getting all the way into page 24. So I'm going to try to go quick, but it's going to be a while. So yeah. This Viper says, this reminds me of the tension between software architects who say read the docs and the engineers who interpret that as skim the code snippets. Yeah, that's actually not that bad. There's the old joke too, I know it gets used in programming. It's like, although it's from other places, like, do not speak to me of the old magic. I was there when it was written by like the people who are, wrote the old technology and stuff. And now people are saying, don't do it that way or do it this way. It's like you get a. I think you're right. You get a replication of the history. I forget the word. Redundancy there or something. Okay. Yeah, that's the thing. This is going to be rage-inducing, so I'm going to start ranting on this too. It's going to take longer. Can't really run through it. The majority of the work appearing in, say, the Journal of History of Philosophy or the British Journal for the History of Philosophy does not just discuss the views of Spinoza, Aristotle, Nietzsche, or Malebranche, but tries to gain an understanding of the systematic issues these historical authors grappled with through engaging with them. Conversely, some skepticism towards the history of philosophy is widespread as well, though it is rarely spelled out systematically what justifies this attitude or what it consists in. Historicists and anti-historicists have thus far mostly avoided to properly articulate the respective controversial metaphilosophical assumptions they feel entitled to take for granted. An explicit debate about these assumptions has yet to be started. To do so is the aim of this paper. My thesis may strike some as epistemically arrogant. Yes, it is. Doesn't strike me. You are epistemically arrogant if you're telling a good portion of philosophers that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. It's not striking, it just is. It seems that before one tries to make up one's mind about important questions that have concerned humanity for millennia, one should at least check what others may have said about them. I wholeheartedly agree, but wish to maintain that this duty of epistemic diligence is just as well, or indeed better, discharged by trying to appreciate what other contemporary thinkers have written about a topic. Unless, what counts as contemporary, first of all? How old do you have to be contemporary? They already threw Wittgenstein to the dustbin of history. And Wittgenstein died in 1953, and all of his works have not been published yet. I don't think all of Wittgenstein's works have been published, so it's not like there's stuff that still isn't coming out. So what counts as contemporary? How many dead how long do you have to be dead for? Unless one thinks that the history of philosophy is a completely random walk, it does not seem unreasonable to hope that people have learned at least something from the past, and that philosophy's history is in some sense contained within current philosophy, if only because we have learned to avoid the most egregious mishaps of the past. Okay, this is a good point. Should stop to just explain this. Random walk is a thing, maybe Vipers can explain it better than I will, but a random walk is a thing in computer science where it's like you take one step and then you randomly turn and then you take another step and whatever. So this is what I was saying. The history of thought is not straight, and they're saying, look, as long as it's not completely random, then it does not seem unreasonable that we have learned something. Yes, but the problem is there is still random walks sometimes, and when you miss that, you can't get it back. So that's why if someone had a good idea 500 years ago, you can't get it back because you are someplace else now. Okay. And so the idea that it's all contained within current philosophy, I just completely disagree that all the ideas in history are now somehow embedded within our current ideas. That is just, I think, patently false. In certain areas, like say the more technical areas, maybe that is the case. We have learned a shit ton about logic, and like there's no reason to use certain logics of the past at all. But that's a limited case. Crash Course Philosophy lays down the evolution of the field nicely. I think you know where he's going to land with this. Yeah, I think he's been... I agree, Vipers. Like, I think this person is laying out their paper in some sort of, like, reasonable way. Like, it's not so far off that you don't know where they're going. But, like, you can write it in chat if you want to, or just find out if you're right. I don't know exactly what you mean by that, Lumpy. Philosophy does lay down the evolution of the field nicely. Like, in the philosophy of physics, you're talking about, like, field theory? But I'm not entirely sure what you meant there. Okay, those who are inclined to reject my thesis straight away often seem to assume, if only implicitly, that there is no progress of philosophy. I did not say that. I said there is, but like there's shit you do not realize that people went off in directions you didn't know. At least not of the kind we find in the sciences. Yeah, that's right. It's not just a build. Oh, Crash Course did 40 episodes on philosophy. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't know what that was. Interesting. And they go in historical order. Yeah, there's also a podcast like History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps, and they go through the history of stuff. Viper says German ethnologist Kurt Ranke coined the term pan-neurons for humans, the story-driven ape. Mnemonics work because we evolved to think in stories. History is a story, but completely narratively unstructured. So it is the best story for comprehension. That's an interesting thing. What counts as a good story for comprehension? What counts as a good story for getting stuck in your memory, like mimetic structure? I don't know, but like trying to think about that's hard. Like, but what is history and why does it? What sort of stories do get stuck in our head? Those are two separate questions. Like, what are the facts and how do we interpret the facts, and a lot of things. So it's like that's, I think, slightly different. But yeah, it's definitely not embedded, but like, yeah, you're gonna have to figure out how you want to understand history before saying it's completely narratively unstructured. No, it's going to be, but like, it's always gonna be in some sort of interpretation, because it's not like we can write down all the things. Oh no, your girlfriend is sick? I'm sorry. Yeah, good luck with the getting healthy and feeling better. Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be, no matter what we do, you think you have arrived at an appropriate time? Oh, Shane, I'm not always on the side of history, but at the moment we're reading a paper saying that the history of philosophy is shit, that you shouldn't bother with the history of philosophy, and I don't think this person has a fucking clue what they're talking about. Oh, you're gonna go shitting your organs out? Oh, you think you caught it too? Yeah. And you're just gonna start shitting. I'm sorry. Good luck, Lumpy. Yeah, and anyone who does not know Shane is a historian and a sociologist. Let's give a little shout out here. And anyone should be going to follow Shane, because Shane's great. You can go in his chat and basically ask him anything about history or sociology, and you're gonna get a pretty good answer. And if he doesn't know, he'll find out too. So yeah, so we're ranting about what is the use of the history of philosophy. Okay, so let me just restart this paragraph. Those who incline to reject my thesis straight away often seem to assume, if only implicitly, that there is no progress in philosophy, at least not of the kind we find in the sciences. Yeah, it's a crappy way to end your week. That may very well be, but I doubt that it is a consequence of many historians of philosophy will be eager to accept. Well, that there is no progress in philosophy? Yeah, see, no, that's just wrong. There is progress in philosophy, it's just of a certain kind. Not scientifically kind, but it's not exactly the same. We could defend the history of philosophy by arguing that doing philosophical historiography is at least not comparatively worse than doing ahistorical philosophy, since both rest on equally shoddy foundations. Fair enough, but defending the history of philosophy by indicting the whole discipline yields a victory that is hardly distinguishable from defeat. Now, this person's got so many problems, but like, I just wonder if you got this person to like list all the things, that all the important philosophy that they think is good, then would those authors say where they got their ideas from? Like, what are their reference lists and who are they referencing? And would those lists actually have historical authors on it? They probably do. And so I think even just by reference list fact listings, like listing numbers, you're still going to get history of philosophy on there. Shane says, well, philosophy isn't a science, it's an art. It doesn't have the same progressive bent as science does. Yeah, there's definitely progress in philosophy. We understand a lot more about certain things, but yeah, it's not exactly scientific where it's just building in like a direction. Like, okay, we know more about the atom now than we ever did, and like stuff like that, and you can just toss the old theories. In philosophy, the old theories have different ideas. And I was saying earlier, things go in different ways. And once you don't realize you could have gone a different way, there's no getting that idea back. It's not very easy to find. Philosopher of art here, I don't think philosophy can be called an art form. Well, that's interesting. We could talk about that also. But the way you do philosophy is not exactly like the way you do science, or at least most of the time, depending on where you are in what area of philosophy you're doing. Like, if you're doing logic, sometimes it is kind of like math. But like, that's, a small slice of philosophy. Okay, 2. The case for the history of philosophy. What about extant defenses of the philosophical significance of the history of philosophy? In this section, my argument will be that while these defenses give us some reasons in favor of dealing with the history of philosophy, they fail to meet the real challenge, which is to provide a justification that specifically recommends doing history of philosophy in order to produce the benefits which, by their own lights, studying the history of philosophy is supposed to produce. Consider this analogy. I want to become a bodybuilder, but I don't know where to start or how to do that, so I asked my friend for advice. I don't know if not all philosophy is so clear in semiotics. They do say that philosophy is clear, but that's not always true. The ambiguity is unwelcome in philosophy, but essential to art. It's not, people say it's clear, but it's not. And so I think they're being disingenuous when they're saying there is no ambiguity in philosophy. I mean, they say it's unwelcome, but look at it. It's never that, clear. Okay, so if you want to be a bodybuilder, he asked his friend, the aim to be clear? Well, the aims and what they are actually doing are different, but yeah, that's fair. That is a difference. So he tells me that I should eat healthy and take a walk every day. One can see right away what is wrong with this advice. While eating healthy and being somewhat physically active probably doesn't undermine my wish to become a bodybuilder, they also don't specifically contribute to its realization. Which behavior will be most adequate as a means to my end is what I want to know. My friend has told me to do things that only vaguely point into roughly the right direction. His advice is unhelpful, even misleading. I think this is a crap example. Philosophers who say ambiguous things can be criticized for the ambiguity, not so for the artist. I'm not sure. If an artist was trying to make a specific kind of representation and they fucked it up, then they can be criticized for failing to make the representation they intended to. I think a lot of times the artists get they're not all, if they don't mean to make something if they mean to make something ambiguous, then they make it ambiguous, and that's fine. Philosophers who mean to make something ambiguous usually are getting criticized. So you're right in that point. Viper says, to support that argument, you're also going to have to define art. 10 programmers will give you 11 different solutions, suggesting that it's a creative discipline. Yeah, well, there is creativity, but I think since semiotics says, point is that you can specify ambiguity. You cannot have ambiguous code. The garbage in, garbage out, and your code has to do the one thing it does one thing. It doesn't, sometimes come out with one answer and sometimes coming out with another, unless of course you have a random function. But that's not what your code does. You don't have ambiguous code. But Bob Ross says they're happy little mistakes. Yes, Vipers. Yeah, but again, that's criticizable, and that's the point. Is that their code sucks. Yes, Vipers. I'm always like, what did this idiot do? And then I realize, oh, that idiot was smarter than me and did it better than I was thinking about. I spent 45 minutes a few weeks ago trying to, put something together, only to realize the one weird line I didn't understand did everything in one line. And I was like, oh God. There went 45 minutes of my life. Yeah. Okay. Current defenses of philosophical historiography almost always commit the same error. They gesture at some supposed benefit we have reason to obtain, honing our critical thinking capacities, improving our ability to understand difficult texts, and the like, and then aim to show how studying the history of philosophy allegedly produces said benefit. But this is not the advice we seek. What we want to know is whether engaging with the history of philosophy to the extent and in the way that it is done right now is the most adequate means towards realizing the stipulated goal. Defenses of philosophical historiography almost never meet this challenge. Consider, for instance, Rachel Barney's Why Study the History of Philosophy. She writes, why should undergraduates be encouraged to read and think about some of the mighty philosophical dead? Really, there are almost too many reasons to bother rehearsing. To sharpen their analytical and critical skills, to acquire important new ideas and concepts, new vocabulary even, to expand their reading and interpretive abilities, to taste the intrinsic fascinations of watching great minds at work, to learn something about big picture intellectual history and its and its relation to history of other kinds, to start to learn to think philosophically themselves by studying some important models, and so forth and so on. Moreover, depending on the period and figure studied, students can either learn important things about where our own society's intellectual framework, such as it is, comes from, or encounter some radically different alternatives, or in the case of ancient Greek philosophy, both. In some of the study of the history of philosophy, at this basic go back to your dorm and read the meditations level, is mind sharpening and mind expanding in all sorts of powerful and uncontroversially worthwhile ways. Author says, this argument fails to show that we should engage with the history of philosophy at all. Do you think we could learn something watching caveman porn? Like porn made by cavemen for cavemen? Yeah, because you'd find out what they thought was sexy. And that would be an interesting thing. So Valpo says, wait, he is talking about what philosophers do, but this interlocutor is talking about what philosophers teach undergrads. Yeah. But I think that's what, that's right. And they already said, the author is going to say basically what they said above, what is that this is beside the point. And so I think this argument fails to show that we should engage with the history of philosophy at all. Let's return to the analogy from above for a minute. I want to get into bodybuilding. People tell me that in order to do so, I should start taking walks. I ask them why. They tell me that taking walks is healthy, taking walks is good for your coordination, taking walks burns calories, and that taking walks is good for your digestion. Shane says, I'm not sure that cavemen had socially complex enough lives to have thought of porn. I agree, but that would make the porn that they made all the more interesting. Okay, so you just want to watch old people fuck, is what you're saying, Vipers. I think that's what the author is arguing, that you're just going over and watching people who are doing the same shit over the same way we are, and we do it better now. I think that's right. In terms of like, it's a idiosyncratic practice doing philosophy, and you're just watching people in the past do it, and there's no good reason for it because we know a lot more about ourselves now. So I think that's a fair analogy. I don't know too many people who use porn and philosophy as analogs, but okay, to each their own. Okay, author says, now I don't doubt that digestive problems would be most unwelcome for developing a career in bodybuilding, but that doesn't mean that when I want to develop a specific skill, I should start doing things that merely wouldn't hurt in developing it or merely made a small contribution to it. I need to take the specific and best available means to it. Likewise, none of the reasons for studying the history of philosophy mentioned above specifically recommend philosophical historiography. If we want to sharpen our analytical and critical skills, acquiring new ideas and concepts, watch great minds at work, it is surely an open empirical question whether reading historical philosophical authors is the best way of doing so. All of the aforementioned goods can clearly be obtained just as well or better by studying contemporary authors or by studying things entirely outside of philosophy. How the fuck do you know who are the philosophical greats among the contemporary authors? Like, is that just your opinion, man? Like, who's the great philosophers out there right now? Usually it takes a while. Do you know, like, how, like, impressed people are with Gottlieb Frege? Frege died almost friendless and broke, and he got, like, anti-Semitic in, like, his old time. He was like, oh, the Jews fucked me up, and that's the reason why, no one read my shit. Like, it's not true. Like, that had nothing to do with it. And then in the 50s, like, him and Peirce, all, like, these people who were doing great work in logic, like, who died fucking friendless and penniless, got rediscovered, and people were like, oh my god, they figured everything out. And so it's like, the idea that we know who the great philosophers are right now, you are wrong. Hume was a fucking librarian for a long time, and he was the best philosopher of his day for a long time. And he was a librarian because, like, that was where he got a job. But did people know he was the best philosopher? Not really. He was scraping by for a while. It's like, this is the hubris right here. Studying contemporary authors and studying things entirely outside philosophy. How the fuck do you know what actually, like, author here. How do you know how to get these goods with the stuff today? People need time to reflect to realize what is good. It does not happen that much. Fads happen in philosophy. Fads happen to everyone, including philosophers, and things that look hot now are not hot in the future. Valpa says, do we have any clear greats post-Wittgenstein? I mean, Heidegger lived longer. Viper, yes. That is correct. I'm saying that. I don't know if we have any clear greats post-Wittgenstein like Wittgenstein. No. As far as I know, but that is a sociological question of like philosophy. Like, have we coalesced around thinking anyone's great? I mean, you can argue that maybe Kripke just died, that he was great, but maybe not. Like, I don't know. Shane says, it sounds like to me like this guy really didn't like his class on history philosophy because his teacher gave him a B. Yeah, this is like Dunning-Kruger, as I was saying earlier. Don't know if you were here. This person doesn't really know what they're talking about and doesn't know that they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, next, consider Caterina Dutil-Novaes claim that philosophy contributes to our conceptual genealogy. The history of philosophy can enlighten is about the origin of our intuitions so that we do not end up treating beliefs that are historically contingent as eternal, self-evident, a priori truths. Charles Taylor proposes a similar argument. Yeah, this is the philosophy knocks down bad arguments, and then you can find that out, because that is a kind of progress. You may not know more things, but you can know what is bad. Okay. In a given society at a given time, the dominant interpretations and practices may be so linked with a given model that this is, as it were, constantly projected for the members as the way things obviously are. I think that this is the case both directly and via its connection with influential modern understandings of the individual and his freedom and dignity. But if this is so, then freeing oneself from the model cannot be done just by showing an alternative. Freeing ourselves from the presumption of uniqueness requires uncovering the origins of the dominant interpretation. This is why philosophy is inescapably historical. Author says, let's call this the archaeology argument. It contains sound advice in general, but it also fails to specifically recommend that we engage in philosophical historiography. For one thing, there are good reasons for thinking that philosophy hardly relies on intuitions at all, and that to the extent that it does, we should rely on intuitions much less anyway. This is relying on mastery is interesting here. That's experimental philosophy, so that guy's already biased that we should, rely on intuitions like that thing. Okay, so this argument doesn't do very much for those who already reject intuition mongering as an adequate method of philosophy. But like I said, it's not necessarily intuitions, but you can find out like bad arguments in some sense, like historically have been knocked down over time, and you can see why those arguments were bad. Valpo says, I took a Plato seminar where a guy more or less asked why Plato didn't just give arguments with numbered premises. Yeah. I wonder who wrote out the first formal logic. There was a Stoic, but that must have been after Aristotle, so I don't even know if they had formal logic to be written in terms of like that sort of style of philosophy at the time of Plato. It's like, you don't even understand, like, it's like historically impossible that could have happened. Shane said, this guy's tactic is eisegetical. He decided what he wanted to argue, and then he went out to cherry pick quotes that could rip up as an object lesson. In part, like I said earlier too, I started off, there's a lot of analytic philosophy that actually goes this way. So it's not as crazy as it sounds if you're doing certain kinds of analytic philosophy, especially in the technical areas. So if you're doing logic, you really don't have to study ancient syllogisms from Aristotle. That would be a pointless way to do contemporary logic. So if you're from that sort of like mentality starting from, you just think, well, everything is like this. And so it's this person's like in a mindset right here, that kind of mindset, and someone needs to like give them a good smack so that they could like get them out of this mindset, show them the history of logic or something so that maybe it would work. But it's that saying that they're cherry picking everything is I don't think that's entirely fair. Their problems run deeper than cherry picking. They actually believe what they're saying and they're not cherry picking. They just can't even realize what's going on here. Like, they don't know, and they don't know that they don't know. And so they're not cherry picking, they just don't even see it. Okay, so yeah. I mean, this intuition thing is a complete red herring, because you can make the argument much more strong than that. Specifically, though, his last quotes have the same response from him. This person didn't say to read history. Well, he's saying you could do it other ways, and then chances are it's going to be better, whatever you're looking at now. But that's fair. Like, he didn't say read history, but the issue is that this author thinks that everything is already embedded in the contemporary literature. Like, if you're reading contemporary stuff, all the old ideas are already here. And so it's like, why would you read the history when all these other people are saying, oh, it's there? But he's saying, look, it's also here, and then you could just be ahead of the game. Yeah. It's a very strong thesis to say everything's already embedded. Shane says, but why doesn't he find people that were arguing in favor of reading historical philosophy and poke holes in their arguments? Why wouldn't that serve as a more valid point? I think he's trying to do that here, but again, yeah, I think he's trying to do it. I think he actually couldn't really find good quotes because this is such a stupid idea that he has that no one's actually tried to defend the history of philosophy. And that's why he, or I'm going to say this is why they made a splash. With this paper, got published, whatever. And that's why it's a fun paper. But again, it's just wrong. But no one actually defends the history of philosophy. Also because I was saying, right at the beginning, this is one of these things that I think are good academically in terms of showing what you do as a philosophy department. And so no one really wants to bring this up. They're like, what do you do in the philosophy department? Well, we teach kids the great ideas in the history of thought and get them to think. And this is how we do it. And you can then say, hey, look, they understand Kant's categorical imperative. And so, so I don't think people have talked about why they like the history of philosophy. Because anyone worth their salt would know better. Than to shit on the history of philosophy. Yeah, okay. But even if philosophers were to legitimately rely on intuitions to some extent, the archaeology argument wouldn't show that the history of philosophy is the best or even a good way of exploring the contingency of our beliefs. When it comes to exploring the genesis of our intuitions, we would expect philosophers to engage with the history of their discipline much less than they actually do, and instead deep dive into psychology, biology, regular history, or cultural history. So here too, the justification we are offered for the history of philosophy ends up recommending that we do something else. Other justifications of historicism do not fare much better. Perhaps the most commonly cited reason for reading the greats is that only by doing so can we learn from and avoid their mistakes. This is what I was saying. Those who are ignorant of the history of philosophy are doomed to recapitulate it, not just reinventing the wheel, but reinventing the square wheel. But, as far as I can tell, the opposite seems much more plausible. In order to repeat the mistakes of a famous philosopher, one must first share their beliefs. Now, few people are born with any degree of credence in the far-fetched propositions embraced by many philosophers. In general, these kinds of beliefs have to be acquired, and the only way of acquiring them is to study these authors. This is wrong. The ideas of their past are in the media of the past, are in the pop culture that we have inherited now. So the ideas of the past are here with us. I can guarantee you, because it takes time for an author to write a book. And so those ideas from that past are then the contemporary media of today. And so this is just false. The old ideas are still with us, and they have trickled through, and they have permeated other areas. And so the idea that you're not going to get these old ideas is wrong. Viper says, I'm picturing students sitting around smoking weed, and one's like, dude, if America was founded today, we would have structured it like we did back then. I don't think we would, because shit's fucked up. And then that guy gets his mind blown when his friend replies, but how would you know not to structure it like that if you didn't know how fucked up it get in the first place? And he's like, I disagree. I'm too high to explain why right now, but tomorrow I'm going to write 26 pages about it. Yeah, but this is the thing. It's you have like some of these guys have, this is what I'm trying to say, is like some these ideas are around, and like you get the bad versions of things too. It's like that's what you really get. Like people get like these crappy versions that, like, you know, who knows where they got the idea from, but it's like some crappy version of the old theories that are not anywhere near as good as the old theories were. Yeah. Like if you were gonna like the idea that someone's gonna come up with a good idea just off the top of their head, it just don't happen. Like it just doesn't. But I mean, people do write 26-page manifestos all the time. Most of them are crap. Anyway, it seems that if we wanted to avoid acquiring false beliefs that we would never arrive at except by reading a particular author, the best thing by far we could do is to avoid reading that author. Like I said, you ain't getting out of it that easy. This shit permeates through everywhere because people back in the day read philosophy then too. Alright, consider who out of the two random samples of the population is more likely to repeat Hegel's mistakes. Over here are 100 people that have never even heard of Hegel, and over there are 100 Hegel scholars that have dedicated most of their professional lives to studying and interpreting Hegel. Presumably, one of the main reasons, though perhaps not the only one, for becoming a Hegel scholar is some basic sympathetic attitude towards the content of Hegel's thought. It may not be unheard of for a philosophical historian to study an author they completely and wholeheartedly disagree with, but it is not the norm. The idea that intense engagement with Hegel's philosophy somehow inoculates against his blunders rather than biasing us in their favor is implausible. How do you know what Hegel's blunders are, my friend? My friend, how do you know what Hegel's blunders are? Maybe they're getting Hegel's really great insights that you don't understand because you never studied Hegel. And the fact that we only think they're blunders is a contemporary blind spot that we have because we haven't caught up to where Hegel is right now, or where Hegel was. Hegel could be ahead of us. When scholars of famous philosopher X tell you that you need to study X to avoid their mistakes, it's as if someone with a known vested interest in you believing what the Bible says, say a priest, to convince you to read the Bible because doing so is the only way to avoid repeating its mistakes. You know, yes or no, but like you could read Bible commentary. Viper says, I'm just surprised in a I hate the history of philosophy paper it took a whole 9 pages to get to Hegel. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's actually really interesting where they put Hegel. They put Hegel here. The idea, like they did this because they know no one understands Hegel. And so they are assuming that everyone thinks Hegel made blunders. And this is actually a rhetorical move. This is why they saved the Hegel, actually. Because they know people don't understand Hegel and they're willing to shit on him without understanding it. Because Hegel's a bad writer. And very difficult. But like they saved their Hegel for this exact spot right here. Yeah, this way. Like right there. They saved it because this is when they pulled out the Hegel because they knew they wouldn't get called out on it. So like I was thinking that, like, why did Hegel show up here all of a sudden? And it's because it's rhetorically useful right there. Okay. And good on you for catching it. I wouldn't believe well I suspect the writer never wrote a damn thing about Hegel, or even read much Hegel, but I don't know. Maybe they're a Hegel scholar and they hate him now. Okay. Author says, I wouldn't believe that person either, for how do biologists and chemists avoid repeating the mistakes of Lamarck or C.E. Stahl made in their respective disciplines? Okay, Lamarck is getting, you know, the old, evolutionary theory, I think was Lamarck, of, what was it? These things get rehashed. It's like, did they really make a mistake, or they just get certain things wrong and other things right? Who knows? Tellingly, they do not accomplish this by reading Lamarck or C.E. Stahl, but by skipping straight to contemporary biology and chemistry, which originated in no small part by departing from their mistakes. Indeed, the best way of avoiding past philosophical errors seems to be to ignore them and to engage with current philosophy right away. Yeah, you're just inheriting new mistakes. That's not always a good thing either. I do not want to overstate this point, however. Physicists still teach Newton and Newtonian mechanics in textbooks, but this doesn't contradict my thesis. Firstly, engagement with historical authors plays a much smaller role in other scientific disciplines compared to philosophy, and moreover, exegetical engagement with the primary text by Darwin or Euclid seems entirely optional in those disciplines, in a way in which it is often not considered optional in philosophy. Wilfrid Sellars once wrote that the history of philosophy is the lingua franca which makes communication between philosophers, at least of different points of view, possible. Philosophy without the history of philosophy, if not empty or blind, is at least dumb. But this is an empirical conjecture that seems plainly false. There is plenty of ahistorical philosophy. Really? Really? There is plenty of ahistorical philosophy. Really, point it out. Is all of it empty, blind, or dumb? Surely not. But what is your ahistorical philosophy? Tell me, my friend. All of your stuff here, Wilfrid Sellars, 1968. I mean, you were already saying that Wittgenstein was thrown out to history. You can name whatever. You can do whatever you want, Shane. Thank you, Book Gravy, for the follow. What do we got here, Vipers? Hi, Book Gravy. Ahistorical philosophy? Oh, yeah, I was wondering that too. I don't know what they are thinking. Who's that? Is that Sellars? I mean, this is not ahistorical philosophy. This is talking about the history of philosophy right here. This paper. Yeah. Oh, Hanno Sauer. Oh, okay, that's the writer. Okay. So it is. Yeah. I don't know if they go by he, but that's what I was thinking. Yeah. So I don't know what their ahistorical philosophy is. I don't know. Is all of it empty, blind, or dumb? Surely not. Do philosophers who are not familiar with the history of philosophy regularly talk past each other much more severely than historians of philosophy? Do Book Gravy. I read philosophy and comment on it live. Feel free to ask questions as we go. We've got a lot of smart people in chat too. We've got like professors, random other folks, just like programmers, chemists. He looks like he queues up for the new iPhone. Yeah, I mean, hipster. This is hipster philosophy. That's true. That's actually a good point. This is kind of hipster, like, oh, I don't need to deal with the past. I'm doing like the cool new stuff. So this is kind of like that kind of philosophy. It's like, why are we bothering with the old people? Get off my lawn. Like, it's the okay boomer. Get off of my, not get off my lawn. It's okay boomer. I don't need to talk to you. Okay. Do scholars of Locke or Hume really understand each other much better than scholars of neither? No, they do not. Maria Antognazza argues that studying the history of philosophy uniquely equips us to learn how to think outside the box. The history of philosophy can contain a subversive force against unjustified philosophical orthodoxy. But if the goal is to learn how to think outside the box and to avoid the pitfalls of philosophical conformity, then why should we engage with the history of philosophy so much and in the way we currently engage with it? Why not read novels or study other disciplines? And why should the historiography of philosophy be pursued as it is now by mostly reading and talking about the greats? Well, that's fair. You don't have to talk about the greats, but there are lots of people in the history that you are also saying not to read by saying don't read the history of philosophy. You don't have to read the greats, author. You hate that phrase? And you love your thinking box. Yeah. It's, crappy catchphrase. If her rationale is sound, we should be focusing far more, or perhaps even exclusively, on less well-known figures who play no role in building the philosophical orthodoxy we are, according to this argument, supposed to challenge. The main lesson to draw here is that any defense of historiography as a method of philosophy has to provide reasons that specifically recommend doing history of philosophy rather than something else, and that recommend doing it in roughly the way it is currently done rather than completely differently. Oh man, we've got some massive thunder going on. Like, I hope I don't lose power. It's like that level of like shakiness. Okay. None of the arguments discussed above establish this. The alleged benefits of philosophical historiography can be obtained at least as well or better by studying contemporary philosophy or other scientific fields. Again, they don't define contemporary, and they don't justify that we're getting anything from the philosophy that's written nowadays. Like, I don't know if philosophy written nowadays is any good, especially this paper. Like, contemporary philosophy? Seriously? And, dude, you could make some fucking paragraphs, too. Maybe you should have read a novel. You could see how to break up ideas better. As evidence against the thesis that historical work in philosophy is philosophically unproductive, one may be tempted to point to philosophical breakthroughs that have seemingly been inspired by deep engagement with past philosophy. The revival of republicanism in political philosophy seems to have benefited greatly from Hobbes and Rousseau. Pittsburgh-style inferentialism in semantics and the philosophy of mind owes a significant debt to Kant, Hegel, and Frege. Yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about. This person, I think, is analytic, because you would not say this stuff here, and like this political stuff, maybe they picked up somewhere, but the history of logic here, Kant, Hegel, and Frege, is an interesting reference. He's Dutch. Maybe Dutch people don't like paragraphs? Maybe. I don't know. Modern virtue ethics rediscovered Aristotle's ethics, and so on. All of this may, of course, be true, but it has little bearing on my thesis here. Note that the claim we need to evaluate here is the counterfactual that the discoveries just mentioned would not have occurred without said historical influences, and it is far from obvious that it is so. No. No. This is the whole point. If you're going to claim that you have to, again, the claim is that humanities don't operate like the sciences. And so the idea that we're just going to have come up with this again does not happen. It was 2,000 years before there was a rediscovery of virtue ethics. Is that... yeah, I thought... I wasn't going to butcher the sentence because I can't really do Dutch, but I suspected as much. And... yeah, see, the problem is they don't like the alternative here, that they're saying that history doesn't help them, but it's completely unobvious that contemporary stuff does it either. Okay, for one thing, the causal order is often the other way around. A philosopher makes a discovery and then later finds out that something similar has already been suggested earlier. Yes, that's the whole fucking point. You didn't need to go do all that hard work if you had just done a little bit of history. It's easier to read a book than to do a lot of fucking research. This is the whole fucking point right here. A philosopher makes a discovery. That is goddamned hard. If you had gone and read a fucking book, you wouldn't need to do that. The connection is then made post hoc. Yes. But that's because you're discounting the fucking point that you had to work for 3 years on some theory before you said, you can't do it this way, made a new discovery, and then you went looking for it, and then you found out it was already worked out, and you could have just read a goddamn book and be done in a few days. Okay, for another thing, we do not know which philosophical breakthroughs would have been made without such engagement with the historical literature. It is far from inconceivable that, even though engagement with its history contributed to whatever modest success have de facto been accomplished in philosophy, not engaging with its history would have led to far greater successes. Well, this is just speculation. You have no idea that we would have done better if we hadn't read it. And again, if you're going to claim that a lot of our new successes were already discovered, then this is just sort of wrong right here. I mean, that we would have had far greater successes? No, we wasted time rediscovering things that we already knew, so all that time we could have saved if we actually had known what was written in the past. Okay. Again, a comparison with other scientific disciplines is instructive. Suppose that physics were conducted as it once used to be, primarily by reading and engaging with historical sources. Whatever insights physicists had generated this way would then be at least partly attributable to their engagement with history, which could appear to vindicate its historical approach. But it is immediately clear that this is not so, for the comparatively ahistorical way in which modern physics is actually conducted has led to far greater successes, discoveries, and developments than would have been counterfactually possible. The fact that some good things have come from engagement with the history does not disconfirm the arguments of this paper. Yes, philosophy isn't physics, it does not operate that way, and no one should think that it does, because that would be stupid. Shane says, I went into my thesis advisor with my first idea for a history thesis, laid the whole thing out, felt very satisfied. He didn't say a word, stood up, went to a bookshelf, pulled a book down, and handed it to me. Seems my idea had been published in 1964. You know, that's a great compliment, though, that you had, your idea was on your thesis advisor's shelf. Like, it means it was worthwhile, and your thesis advisor had a book on it. It just happened to be, you know, from many years earlier. But, like, exactly, it saved you that amount of time that you could ask someone and they could just hand you the book. And then you could do something new after that. Like, that's why this whole paragraph here is madness. Because this is just like right here. This is the whole thing. Right there. Like, they have just argued against their entire thesis. It could have saved them so much time, because if you had spent 2 years or whatever your thesis was on, as opposed to, 2 days reading that book. Okay. 3, historical authors were probably wrong about almost everything. Oh, okay, we're just getting negative, what's the fucking word? Induction on history. That's fine. The case for philosophical historiography is in bad shape. What about the case against history? Perhaps the best argument for studying the great philosophers of the past is that in philosophy we want to arrive at the truth about various matters, and those great philosophers may just be in possession of part of it. Here, the justification for doing history of philosophy would be straightforwardly epistemic. If we ignore philosophy's history, we will miss out on its important insights and clever arguments. This argument, however, incurs an important explanatory burden. We want to arrive at the truth about X, but how did the truth about X get into those past works in the first place? Surely even the greatest of philosophers of all time did not have divine a priori access to the realm of ideas. Even Occam or Fichte had to rely on something in coming up with their claims. For the most part, any philosopher has to rely on A, the scientific information available at the time, and B, the work of their peers, and the work of history. But yeah, this is like fine, yeah, you have to work on whatever you get. Take problem X. Problem X is important and difficult. Now the question becomes a social epistemological one. How much testimonial weight should we assign to the opinion of a person regarding a difficult but important matter about which we know that they did not have the required empirical or scientific knowledge to arrive at a minimally competent and well-informed opinion about X, and about which, oh my god, this was one fucking sentence, and about which we know that they had no familiarity, none whatsoever, with the recent scholarly and scientific debate about X? The answer seems clear. No weight at all. Yeah, if someone just makes some shit up, you don't have to listen to them. That's fair. An important assumption here is that there are at least some criteria of philosophical quality, whatever they are. Some positions are more thought through, better informed, more consistent, more coherent, or more plausible. These are epistemic criteria, and they are at least not completely arbitrary. But if there are such standards, then the following seems to hold. 1. It is unlikely that historical authors were right about anything because they lack the scientific and or empirical information required for it, since so many philosophical claims or theories depend on scientific and or empirical propositions. Really? I didn't know all the moral theorists required scientific and empirical propositions. You could go talk to the virtue ethicists, the Kantians, the deontologists, the utilitarians. I had no idea that like their claims relied on, scientific theories. That's weird. 2. It is unlikely that historical authors were right about anything because they lack the theoretical and or conceptual sophistication required for it, since philosophical competence hinges on at least a basic degree of familiarity with current philosophical debates. Yes, bulls have been shaking since time immemorial. Thank you, Vipers. Shane says that counters his own point, though. If you don't use existing material, which includes historical data, and you just go ahistorical, like he said earlier, you are the person opining about the problem X. Exactly. This person, seemingly, this is really a bad argument here, because what they just said is they have I think maybe the problem is they really don't have a good, well-defined conception of what contemporary is. Contemporary includes things not just written like this year. You have to look at stuff in, the recent history, and the harder the question you ask, the less is actually written on it. Like, the more difficult something is, a lot of times you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel to find good commentary on that question if you have a very hard, interesting question. And so that means you have to go farther into the past for anything that would even be considered, even something considered contemporary for like certain areas is still like, 50, 100 years ago, because not everything is written about, say, philosophical syntax. You're reading some of these people because they're the only ones who have commented on it. And so I think that's part of the thing here, is that they have this weird sense of like history and like contemporary. It is exactly what you said about the Dutch students. Oh, that's right. You did call the example. You did call that one Vipers. And they were Dutch students, or they're smoking Dutchies. I think you have to be American for getting that reference. Okay. So yeah, this is like... Yeah, Shane called it. This is just wrong. Okay. Author says, note that we readily apply 1 and 2 to contemporary authors whose contributions are immediately discounted when and to the extent that they lack basic competence in just this way. Historical authors should not be exempt from this threshold. Yes, Shane. Fast deduction on the left-hand side. Incision, and don't forget we talked about earlier. Metaphor. Oh, well, we're halfway there. Well, yeah, and we're an hour and a half in, Vipers. Reading history paper. Metaphor can be inspired by old ideas. Yes. Like, that's a great point. Old ideas are like but this is the thing. When you're not doing science, when you're doing something humanistic, metaphor, then you have to go someplace else. And old ideas are great areas like to go think about things in a new way. So yeah. It may seem as if these epistemic criteria beg the question at issue here, being acquainted with the current theoretical vocabulary and current empirical evidence, a threshold that historical authors, for obvious reasons, couldn't possibly clear. Of course, one may be tempted to reply, if we turn it into a criterion of whose work deserves our attention and whose doesn't, that gives a given author be alive today, then the philosophical irrelevance of a historical authors follows trivially. Yeah, but again, being alive is really fucking stupid. People get unalived very quickly, and like they could have been like, young. Stupid. But let's be honest, the same thing applies to this very paper. You did highlight some good points. This is a problem. This paper is quoting a huge number of historical people and saying they're all fucking stupid. But like that's the point. You can't quote the historical people and then say quoting historical people is stupid in the same breath. It's just dumb. Yeah, I mean, it's instructive, of course. It's fun to rant about stuff. I think we, like myself and chat, are saying smart things, and that's always useful. That's true. If you're dead, then you don't have to worry about it. So I think we're saying smart things. The author is giving us a platform for saying those smart things. This is what he looked like as a PhD student. Let's find out. Copy link. You want to slap him? You got to be fair to these people. Like, I mean, if this was, whatever. Okay. Fine. You may be right. The thunder is making me rageful. I like the thunder and rain. I do. It's the problem is when people are saying like obviously stupid things, and it's just like, and it didn't get called out. And there's a reason it didn't get called out here, which is kind of interesting, is because I think a lot of people actually don't care about the history of philosophy, and so they give it a pass. But like, it's weird when people don't realize what's going wrong. He looks like he thinks he's an excellent lover. Yes, in his head. That's right. Author says, but the appearance that the above criteria are question begging in any problematic sense of the term is misleading. For one thing, consider that the same charge would apply to the converse epistemic standards as well. Suppose that one were to approach the question of how relevant historical work is to today's philosophy by stating upfront that being familiar with the best current available conceptual tools and the empirical information has no impact on the philosophical quality of someone's work. This too could be legitimately seen as stacking the deck in favor of the history of philosophy. Either way, we would be begging the question. Again, what counts as the current conceptual tools? who gets to decide what counts as currently available. Sometimes the best tools are old ones, like the new ones break on you, they're made shittily. Sometimes you have to use old tools because they were made better. Shane says his historical performance doesn't matter and can't be used as judgment against his current sexual prowess. He's an ahistorical lover. Very well said. Yeah. The real question is whether the aforementioned epistemic criteria are illicitly biased against historical authors and whether they fail to display the proper degree of impartiality that is required to fairly adjudicate the question. To see why these standards are not improperly partial in the favor of the present, consider the fact that we also apply these criteria to anyone who lives today, and that as a result, the philosophical views and opinions of a staggering number of contemporary people are simply ignored or discounted as well. Hey, Chad Guy, what's up? How are you doing? We're reading a paper on why the history of philosophy is stupid, and we think the author, well, at least I think the author is stupid. I used to email everyone the YouTube link, but that was back when I was really trying to be nice about everything, and so I would have been much nicer and wouldn't be calling this paper stupid. I did actually email one author a paper that I ranked on badly, and they said they'd send me some references, and then they never did because their paper was stupid and bad. Hey, look, I'm streaming. Thank you, Discord. Yeah, I could send him the link, whatever. I don't feel bad. Feel free to respond to me. And I can tell you, the arguments that this author would give me would, it'd be the same shit. Oh, you didn't justify history, and you're only criticizing the contemporary. It's like, yes, because you don't know what counts as history or what counts as contemporary philosophy. Those distinctions only matter. Those are kind of arbitrary distinctions. Like, you can't actually tell me what should be thrown into the history basket versus what counts as good philosophy now. You just have the stuff that gets published. That doesn't make it good. Ooh, you have a Tesla. Nice. In fact, we're simply employing a common sense epistemic criterion. And what time is it anyway? Yeah. Well, this is part of the thing. That's right, Shane. It is getting a bit existential. The problem here is that the reason this is getting published is that this is a strain in analytic philosophy that you don't care about the history, and the existential and continental philosophers are much more historically oriented, and so this is an assault against them. And that's why this got published, is because this was acceptable in some sense in a sociological way, that the analytic people are okay with this. Oh, that's fun. I didn't ever think of it being a really fast, fun golf cart. I know that they their acceleration's great because it's you don't have to change gears and you get all the power immediately. I've never driven one. I did sit in one in a dealership once though, and I've been in I've been in them before, a few times. Okay. Common sense epistemic criterion, that philosophical competence requires familiarity with the relevant theoretical and empirical state of the art. Yes, what counts as state of the art, my friend? You're not telling me. Which then happens to rule out the philosophical views of billions of people, by far the most of which are alive today. As it happens, the great philosophers of the past also turn out to be among this diverse group of people, all of whom are fairly evaluated in light of the same criteria. You drove a different kind of electric car. Fun golf cart sounds right. Good acceleration, yeah. 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. Oh god, that gotta be fun. Consider Plato or Rousseau's evaluation of the virtues and vices of democracy. Here is a non-exhaustive list of evidence and theories that were unavailable to them at the time. Historical experience. Oh god, they're just gonna list things that the past didn't have. That's great. Okay, historical experiences with developed democracies, empirical evidence regarding democratic movements in developing countries, Various formal theorems regarding collective decision-making and preference aggregation, such as the Korn-Jury theorem, Arrow's impossibility result, and the Hong-Page theorem, the medium voter theorem, the miracle of aggregation, etc. Existing studies on voter behavior, polarization, deliberation, information, public choice economics, including irrationality, democratic realism, the whole subsequent debate on their own arguments, etc. When it comes to people currently alive, we would steeply discount the merits of the contribution of any philosopher whose work were utterly uninformed by the concepts, theories, and evidence just mentioned and whatever other items belong on this list. Did you realize that their arguments are on this list and that means you have to fucking read them? You just put it right there. Their own arguments, which is Plato and Rousseau, right here. I mean, you're driving green, and why should anyone mock you for that unless they're just like, oh yeah, muscle cars is the way to go, but like, stupid. Shane says, so let me just take the opportunity to point out that modern developed democracies became such in part due to writing like, oh shit, what was that guy's name? That dude that wrote The Republic? Forco? Knifo? Yeah. No, Cupo. When it comes to people currently alive, we would steeply oh yeah, sorry. Yeah. It's like, oh my god. It's not clear why the great philosophers of the past should not be subject to the same standards. Bear in mind that time and attention are severely limited resources. Therefore, every decision we make about whose work to dedicate our time and attention to faces important trade-offs. Capo. The nature-nurture debate in moral psychology illustrates the same point. Philosophers have long discussed whether there is an innate moral faculty and what its content may consist in. Now consider which theories and evidence were unavailable to historical authors such as Hume or Kant when they developed their views on the topic, and compare this to a recent contribution to the debate. No. The current debate does not exist without the concepts these guys set out. I mean, women too, like these folks in the past set out. The idea that you even have this debate does not exist without these people. You are using their concepts still. And you're saying, oh, these are like linguistic corpus data, evolutionary psychology, moral grammar theory. Who do you think defined these fucking things to begin with? You're using their words. Sophisticated statistical methods. Bayesian form. What? Yeah, when did Bayes live? Remind me that. When did he live? 1800s, I think. Bayesian formal modeling. 250 years of the nature-nurture debate. 250 years of subsequent debates on Hume and Kant. Finally, consider Hobbes' justification of political authority. So, in other words, the contemporary debate has to know what the fuck this is because there's 250 years of debate on it. So his argument is we shouldn't read Plato because he didn't have access to modern developed democracy. Yeah, it's fucking crazy. You're watching. Oh, I thank you for actually having me on while you're watching House of the Dragon. I mean, I know broadcasting at the same time as Game of Thrones, and you're liking. Oh, okay, House of the Dragon's more than the Ring of Power. Interesting. I think they both are taking a little bit of time to get themselves moving. Yeah, Shane, like it's a little silly. Okay, finally consider Hobbes' justification of political authority in terms of how it allows us to avoid unpleasantness of the state of nature. Here are some concepts and theories that were not available to him when he devised his argument. Utility functions, Nash equilibria. Alright, I guess those matter to political authority, but whatever. Dominant strategy, backwards induction, behavioral economics. Why does backwards induction matter to this theory? That's weird. Experimental game theory, biological evidence on the adaptivity of cooperation, empirical evidence regarding life in hunter-gatherer societies, cross-cultural data regarding life in contemporary tribal societies. I mean, yeah, but again, what does this have to actually matter to political authority? Maybe these things don't even matter. I don't know. Author says, again, when it comes to deciding whose philosophical work to devote our time and attention to, any person that didn't have any knowledge whatsoever of the above items would be a dubious choice. Backwards induction because he has a head up his ass. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a use of it that I don't understand. I mean, I just know it from the logical side. So maybe there's stuff like in political philosophy I don't know. You'd love Rings of Power if Peter Jackson was the lead director. Yeah, I mean, people do love Peter Jackson stuff, his trilogy. Yeah. And so, but you're not going to get Peter Jackson. Well, I mean, he'd have to want to do it, and they'd have to give him like probably more than what they want to give him to get it for him to have done it. But yeah. A version of this problem is that somewhat more specific to moral philosophy is that in ethics it is more often important not to assign disproportionate testimonial weight to people of which we have good reasons to suspect that they harbor deep objectionable attitudes or publicly express moral beliefs we have reason to deem unjustified and or morally odious. Personally, I have made a habit of not heeding the ethical advice of Adolf Eichmann, Ted Bundy, and various of my family members. But upon looking at the moral views held by many of the most prominent authors in the history of philosophy, one often cannot help but shudder. Plato advocated abolishing the family violently if need be. Aristotle defended a version of slavery as natural. Locke advocated religious toleration only to exclude atheists from the social contract. Kant argued that masturbation is one of the gravest moral transgressions there is. Hegel claimed that it is an a priori truth that the death penalty is morally obligatory and indeed a form of respect towards the executed. The list of historical philosophers who held sexist, racist, and other discriminatory views would be too long to recount here. Shane says you can't worry about Hobbes' point since he didn't know about J.S. Mills, and Mills wouldn't have had the significant point of utilitarian he had not read Hobbes, been able to refute him. That's his second use of, Viper says, his second use of a priori. My suspicions are confirmed. He's a prick. Yeah. Tindario says, hey, Tindarius, what's up? But the rings of power we got is crap. Yeah, maybe. I haven't watched. You're going to stop pointing out the internal inconsistencies here, Shane? No, go right ahead. Keep doing it. People like this deserve to get their internal inconsistencies called out because they are making the ahistorical argument. They have to be able to justify themselves internally right now. And if they are failing on even being coherent, then this gives a much better gives a what is called a I can't even think of the word, but it's a internal critique of their own work. And you could say, well, even if maybe the historical people had bad ideas, they at least didn't contradict themselves. And this person would have to accept that, because if they're contradicting themselves, as we have shown multiple times in this paper, this person can't actually run from that sort of contradiction. I'm getting by, Tindarius. I agree, Vipers. This is, and that's why the internal contradictions should get pointed out here, because it smacks them in the face, because it shows that they aren't sounding smart. They're sounding stupid because they're contradicting themselves paragraph to paragraph. We're reading this paper, Tindarius. It's about how you shouldn't bother reading the history of philosophy, and I mean, I'm biased against this. And in part because I used to hold views closer to this person, and I think I know better now. Yeah, you're on board that this guy he does not appreciate the history of philosophy. That's what it is. They know some things, but they do not have a deep understanding of this stuff. So they're well enough to quote random stuff, but like you said, you thought they were cherry picking. Then I don't think they're cherry picking. I think they just don't understand what was going on, and so that way they can easily discount the history of philosophy. Yeah. Okay. I mean, and the idea that like contemporary philosophers all have good views too is like stupid also. Like a lot of contemporary philosophers are shitheads. I mean, go look at all the you can look at the history of like contemporary big names. They're all criticized for stupid shit too. Does the fact that a historical philosopher endorsed some extremely despicable moral views entail that we should discount their views entirely? One may think that in order for the latter stronger claim to follow, one would have to show that said philosopher's entire body of work is somehow deeply and thoroughly infected by those despicable views. But note how this invokes precisely the kind of double standard I aim to criticize here. I sincerely doubt whether we could cut any contemporary author the same slack and continue to take seriously their contributions to moral philosophy despite their defense of the claim that indigenous people are savages and women male property. Because who knows, maybe the philosopher has some other good ideas. Again, it's like this doesn't follow. Okay, Shane says, there's this one contemporary philosopher that talks about orcs in Tolkien and doesn't cite primary source work. There it is. Well, he's dead now, Shane. He died last year, so he doesn't count. He's not contemporary anymore. Viper says, there is no value in the Lord of the Rings trilogy because we have a long-written, more expansive show in Rings of Power. Exactly. Yeah, see, this is so weird. Because this is assuming that, like, the people nowadays have good views according to the people in the future. People in the past didn't really think that their ideas were despicable. We think they're despicable, but people in the future may then think that of our ideas. And so this author, the author here, is using a double standard. We are judging people in the past, but judging people today by our standards. No, if you're going to judge people in the past by today's standards, you have to judge people today by future standards. That would be a fair comparison. This is an unfair comparison, what they're doing. Because the people in the past, they were criticizing the people that were earlier than them. They thought, oh my god, those people were terrible. We know so much better now. But that's exactly what we're doing. So you can't make that claim, author. In general, if we find out that a person holds monstrous moral beliefs like that, we tend not to listen to them, much less treat them as experts on what's good or bad. That's actually funny, yeah. Game of Thrones is a recursive loop. That's a new show that tells the history of the old show. Yeah, prequels like that. Alright, if we found out that a person was unable to grasp basic moral truths and didn't understand why, for instance, cooperation is supposed to be good or why pain is supposed to be bad, we would assign no testimonial weight to that person's moral beliefs. Why should moral beliefs that we would treat as disqualifying for someone alive today not be treated as similarly disqualifying for someone who happens not to be alive anymore? Off? Am I dead? Oh no. Doesn't say I'm doing bad. Oh, sorry. I got confused because you were talking to Shane and then you were correcting what you said, but like it scared me. I thought I had an F. Okay. Yeah, so this is, again, the author here is just wrong because you're not judging contemporary people by you're judging historical people by contemporary standards, but the parallel would be judge contemporary people by future standards, which we don't know. And so this is just all just incorrect. Should Shane cosplay as Indiana Jones? I mean, he does have an adventure hat, so you could say he does quite often. Contemporary philosophers today also have insufficient information and are thus also likely to be wrong about everything, and surely current work isn't satisfactory in light of the improved standards of empirical corroboration and theoretical sophistication that future science and philosophy will usher in. My arguments show that then, see, this is the problem. The author had this idea, but couldn't fucking apply it one paragraph earlier. Do my arguments show then that even contemporary philosophy is not worth paying attention to? First, let me emphasize that this objection concedes my central point, that we can't learn very much from engaging with philosophy that isn't up to the best available standards of argument and evidence, and that we should thus largely ignore historical work. The question is whether this argument overgeneralizes to current philosophy as well, and I don't think it does, since the recommendation to stick to the best currently available state of the art remains defensible, if only because said improved future work in philosophy would never come into existence in the first place if we didn't do philosophy right now. That our current level of philosophical sophistication will one day be outdated too is not an argument against doing philosophy at the current level, since no other level is actually available. It is an argument, however, against doing philosophy at any level that is, at this very current moment, already known to be outdated. Shane should cosplay as Indiana Jones. Closest potential real thing was the Ark of the Covenant? Oh, interesting. Okay, either way, the objection just sketched would not amount to a defense of the history of philosophy as much as a rejection of all philosophy, historically oriented or not, and for the record, I am quite happy to entertain the possibility that philosophy in general is epistemically flimsy, but whether this is so is not my concern here. Yeah, I mean, there's always a question like, what are we just whacking ourselves off in philosophy, and that's a fine thing, but it's not what they're talking about. But yeah, again, I don't think they have a good grasp of what counts as contemporary. Like, contemporary can mean have a lot more space to it. Yeah, no, this has been one of my things I've been harping on, Shane. I have no idea what they mean by contemporary. They already said Wittgenstein was out of date when not all of Wittgenstein's papers, I think, have even been published yet. And like Wittgenstein died in 1953. So I really don't think this person has thought through their sense of history and what counts as historical, because that really is one of these political lines. Like what you think should be in the history of philosophy versus contemporary philosophy is really a matter of your opinion on what you think is worth working on. And so this person's basically just saying everything I don't like should be history of philosophy and isn't real philosophy. That's just them saying like what they think counts as philosophy is philosophy, and that's just I mean, that's fine, they can be arrogant like that, but the rest of us have no reason to listen to them. iPhone 14, yeah, this person is on i14 Plus Super. They have to be on the cutting edge of technology, otherwise it's outdated and can't be used. Historical authors were probably much worse philosophers. Not compared to you. Another way of framing the issue at hand is to ask who should be considered an epistemic peer. I fucking hate this concept, by the way. You have no idea what I've done in my life with respect to how hard I've worked at philosophy. The idea that I have peers in philosophy, yes, I have peers in philosophy. The idea that I have to worry about like who you are, I'm not fucking worried about it at all. Turtleneck during sex, yeah. And black turtlenecks only. Well, actually, no. Probably has a lot of variety of colors nowadays, but that's okay. Fucking hate the whole idea of epistemic peers. A commonly held view in the epistemological literature on peer disagreement is that two individuals, S1 and S2, are epistemic peers with regard to a given proposition P, if and only if, to the extent that they possess the same evidence, are equally good at processing it, they have the same evidence and are equally good at processing it. See, I have no fucking clue what this means. Being equally good at processing evidence. I have done a lot of work in philosophy, and the idea that like I have equally what does it mean to be equally good as me or you at processing? We think differently. There's people who think differently. Yeah, I completely it makes me cringe every time I think about this. It seems fairly clear that the further past one goes, the status of peerhood becomes increasingly fragile, simply in virtue of the fact that past philosophers did not possess the same evidence because it was unavailable at the time, and were not equally good at processing whatever evidence they had, in large part because they were unable to draw on a comparably richly developed state of the art of their discipline, which would contain the required conceptual resources to do so. No. They thought harder than you, and so they were using better. They were faster than you. They were faster than you are ever going to be in your entire life. And so that's what they were using. That's why they have a much richer philosophy, is because they were faster than you're ever going to be. And so it's not that they lacked science. It's that they were thinking faster. You have found a new level of no respect for this. No, this is actually not terrible as far as philosophy goes. This makes perfect fucking sense at every point. It's terrible, but it makes sense. Like, I've read much worse papers on philosophy roulette. It seems unlikely that past philosophers would have possessed enough philosophical competence for it to be worthwhile to study them in great detail. Like I said, some of these people had our ideas first and may have even had them better. Oh, there's a joke about Frank Ramsey. And this was true, I think, up until maybe very recently. It says, if you're like an analytic philosopher, and you think you have a good idea, the Ramsey rule says, not only has Frank Ramsey already thought of it, but Frank Ramsey has said it better than you. Shane says he's wrecking his own argument. Once again, he's arguing that historical philosophers were bad because they were doing philosophy ahistorically, and that's his fucking point. That's actually right too. Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, if you look at the old philosophers doing it without the sense of time, then they are clearly, well, they were doing philosophy ahistorically, but they were also using whatever they had at that time. So it's like he still has a point that they were still thinking with the evidence that they had when they were thinking it. But yeah. It's like, oh yeah, they were doing it ahistorically. But that's still, I think that's fine. He's not griping with the philosophers. They were bad. They're just bad to read now, I guess. But you're right. This was poorly said here, because what he implied was that they were bad. He shouldn't say they were bad. He's just saying they're bad to read. But he just covered above that you can't discredit contemporary philosophers. Yeah, this was a double standard he has for contemporary philosophers. But he's saying he gives contemporary philosophers a pass because it's the best we have right now. Yeah. But yeah, that was what. Yeah, I agree. They would be bad in the future, but like he gives the contemporary people a pass because this is all we have. Yeah. So yeah. It seems unlikely that the past philosophers would have possessed enough philosophical competence that's on today's standards for it to be worthwhile for them to study in great detail. Yeah, no. This is the problem. Let me restate this. I have to correct his sentence though. It seems unlikely that the past philosophers would have possessed enough philosophical competence by today's contemporary standards to get published today for it to be worthwhile to study them in great detail now. So he's giving them again. Yeah, they are the best they were then, but like we don't have to read them now because times have moved on. And like the only people who get a pass are the ones who are at the cutting edge of research, which I just realized is a very 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 classist and sort of thing. Only the people at the toppest universities who have the most access to resources are really the good philosophers then. And so this is very elitist. I think that's a point that's getting has not been brought up yet. You don't understand why this is elevating your... Well, you're a historian, and this is like anti-historical. Like I said, I used to be more like this guy, where I thought, well, why are we bothering? Isn't most of this stuff already getting rehashed out in the contemporary literature, and we don't have to look back? But, yeah, I mean, that's wrong. But, like, this author does not know that yet. Hopefully they will learn one day. Yet, when one looks at which philosophers command the most scholarly attention, one finds that the distribution of airtime is drastically skewed in the direction of the past, and indeed the distant past. Here are the results of a recent poll concerning the most important philosophers of all time. Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Hume, Descartes, Socrates, Wittgenstein, Locke, Frege, Aquinas. We'll just call him Socrates. Yeah, so... well... I mean, this is the history of Western philosophy, and so there are problems with this list, just not them being old and white and dead, but like there's other problems, but yeah. Yes, this is the history of Western philosophy. He's very optimistic for the future for someone who lives in a country where a quarter of it's below sea level. Yeah, his planning is not good. Everyone on the list has been dead for at least several decades, and most have died centuries or millennia ago. I mean, the only people who are even close that lived into the 20th century here are Wittgenstein and Frege. And Frege died, 1925. And I said Wittgenstein died in 1953. The Investigations was published in 53. That's why I'm confused. Wittgenstein died in 51. That's right. My apologies. Most of the philosophers which are considered great and thus worth studying lived a very long time ago, but most people live today. How is this possible? Oh my God, people are alive today. Oh my God. Why should the distribution of philosophical importance be so heavily lopsided in favor of the past? One possible explanation for this historical bias is that great philosophers are philosophers that come up with great ideas, that great ideas are few and far between, so that most of them, the low-hanging fruit, as it were, have already been taken. Yeah, I'm sorry, Shane. I'm not a historian. Like I said, I was closer to this guy when I was younger. I was more ahistorical. Like, who cares what the exact date is? I mean, I try to get things right because it's important, but like it wasn't knowing the exact dates was like not very important. And I'm bad with birthdays too. The great philosophers are great because they were first. Note, however, that this reply concedes my point about the philosophical competence, for it is not immediately clear why, in deciding whose work to study, we should focus on those who had it easiest, that is, those who could afford to compromise on philosophical sophistication. Moreover, why not keep plucking those low-hanging fruits ourselves, and then quickly move on to the harder-to-reach morsels, only we have finally gained access to. Here, too, I am assuming that there are at least some criteria of philosophical quality. I don't have a single question on any of my tests in history that asks a specific date. Yeah, I know. It's a joke. The more important thing is knowing, like, the things that happened, why, the important things, the important people, and knowing exactly the dates is not important. Although it does matter when something came before something else, and if you get your dates mixed, because then you don't always know what caused what. But, like, yeah. So you do need to have a general ordering, even if you don't know the dates. Alright, so there is some criteria of philosophical quality. Yeah, see, they don't specify it, though. And I was saying there is some criteria of philosophical quality, but it isn't what this person thinks. So if the author says, if this is correct, then there are at least some differences in philosophical competence. See, what do you mean by philosophical quality? Here, they're saying competence. That, like, competence in today's society is the same as the competence in, like, Aristotle's society. Not really. Philosophical competence is quality of ideas. And Aristotle's quality of ideas is, like, second to none. Now, you have to find the ideas by, like, sifting through all the crap that is in there too. But the ideas are the quality, not the standards by, like, science that we have. That's just again, they're judging philosophy by scientific standards, which is wrong. Yeah, so the ability to meet these standards of philosophical quality, they're not talking about philosophical quality. This is a positivist. They're trying, like, to make philosophy like a science, which was something that we got rid of last century, which is a historical thought that this person should own up to and realize that they are, like, relying upon, and should probably be, according to them, thrown into the dustbin of history. All right. Some philosophers are better informed, more intelligent, more industrious and diligent, cleverer, more experienced, or all of the above. And if that is so, then there are differences in philosophical ability between philosophers. And if that is so, then it is extremely unlikely that the distribution of great and/or important philosophers should be so heavily skewed toward the past. Why not? I mean, only we had a few ancient Greeks, and then we had some other people along the way. But, like, it isn't skewed that far into the past. It's skewed over the 2,000 years. So this is just wrong. A second assumption I am making here is that, other things being equal, we should engage more heavily with, that is, devote more time and attention to, philosophers who are more rather than less competent. So understood. Again, you have not defined competent. You're only defining it as contemporary, which again is dumb. Viper says he's such an egoist. I'm just as smart as all these people, but I don't get any credit. Yeah, that may be it. This may be kind of whiny. They want more credit. Why did so many achievements happen before now? Yeah, it's like, oh my god, people did stuff before me. That's so weird. Yeah, I mean, there could be a bit of this I deserve more in this paper. Like, they deserve more, like, they're a special snowflake, and they deserve to be treated better than they are. I don't know. A third assumption is that philosophical competence, or the building blocks needed to develop and sustain it, are neither innate or acquired, or a mix of the two, are either innate or acquired. Please note that I am not suggesting that there is a distinct faculty to do philosophy which may be innate or acquired, merely that being able to develop philosophical competence hinges on more basic capacities, general intelligence, linguistic prowess, creative thinking, etc., that contribute to philosophical ability. If we combine these three assumptions, the historical bias of philosophical greatness comes out as extremely surprising. But again, what is the historical bias here? Alright, we've got, these are the ancients. Then we've got a few from, like, the 1700s. Then we've got 15 to 1600. Okay, then we go. These are these two ancients, and then this is so again, Socrates is ancient. I should have. So, boom, Socrates. Then we've got 1700s is people is Kant and Hume. And then we've got 1500s people is Descartes, Locke. And then Frege is the one from the 1800s and into the 20th century, and also with Wittgenstein. So these two get connected up. And then Aquinas is, a different time period altogether. This is earlier. So really, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different time periods. And so I don't understand what this person is talking about in terms of their historical thing. Why should everyone be in the 20th century be a great philosopher? Like, Wittgenstein's a 20th century philosopher, and Frege is basically 19th to 20th century philosopher. Although most of his important work was, I think, written around the earlier than the turn of the century. Although some of his later stuff is good too. So this just doesn't make sense. Like, what they're saying is wrong. So if we combine it, was it extremely surprising? No, it's not surprising at all because it doesn't work. You're just wrong. Suppose first that philosophical competence is innate. In that case, we would assume that it is distributed more or less randomly, perhaps according to a natural lottery. Also, the history of philosophy is not well recorded. For a long time, medieval philosophers were shit on by the Enlightenment philosophers because the Enlightenment philosophers wanted to make themselves sound better. And so this is a sociological thing that we've come down this way. People are only now going back and appreciating the quality that were in the medieval philosophers, but that makes that list up that we just looked at wrong because it's a sociological historical list, not a quality list. Okay, so it should be randomly according to a natural lottery. If this were so, then the overwhelming... Yeah, this is probably getting into racism levels of badness at this point, when they're talking about natural lottery on philosophical ability. If this were so, then the overwhelming majority of competent philosophers should be alive today. Maybe they are, but they just don't write philosophy. I mean, because there are more people alive today. Statistically speaking, there should be 10 individuals in present-day Kaliningrad that are equally competent philosophers as Kant was. Let me emphasize that this is indeed what my argument entails. Likewise, Princeton or Zurich University now employ numerous physicists that are as good or better than Einstein was. This is not to say, of course, that Kant and Einstein weren't philosophical or scientific geniuses of the highest rank that are only found very rarely in a generation, but merely that the state of the art of their disciplines, in no small part thanks to their own work, has undergone drastic improvements since their respective times. Now, suppose that philosophical ability is acquired through training. If philosophical competence is learned, then the historical biased distribution is even more mysterious. Nowadays, there are many, many more philosophers than 200 or 2,000 years ago, and those philosophers encountered much, much better environments in which to hone their philosophical abilities. Here is a non-exhaustive list of how the conditions for developing philosophical competence today are better than they used to be. Again, this is getting on the, not really understanding how hard philosophy is. Just because there's more people doesn't mean there's more people willing to do the work. And again, yeah, so it's and the distribution here, again, makes no claim to historical, sociological things, where not everyone has the money or stuff that, you can actually go right in the time. So, the first rule of Project Mayhem is you do not ask questions. Yeah. Okay. But here's how things are better than they used to be. 1. No matter how gifted, it is hard to become a great philosopher if you die in childhood. We don't know for sure that infant mortality in ancient Greece was almost certainly at least an order of magnitude greater than in the present day. 2. If one doesn't die, one can become stunted or cognitively impaired due to insults in childhood or early life, or, bad malnutrition. Again, we don't know how prevalent this was, but it certainly is much less now than then. 3. Well, we don't know if insults in childhood or early life are less. Maybe they were much nicer in ancient Greece. But maybe our food is better now, but maybe it isn't. 3. Although there remain lamentable barriers to people who aren't rich, white men entering philosophy in the present day, these were even worse in the past. Compare one prospect as a woman in modern Greece versus ancient Athens, or as someone from a lower socioeconomic group versus a slave. I once made this point, and I was criticized by a non-Western philosopher saying, yeah, that may have been the case in the West, but not everywhere else was this as hard. So it's fair that maybe there's some good philosophy coming out of poor people, not lower socioeconomic classes from different parts of the world. But I mostly agree with this, but it may not actually hold. Yeah, we have the internet now. That may make philosophy even harder, says Valpo. Yeah, I mean, there's more distractions nowadays, too. Shane says, so even if you survived in the past, you were clearly stupid, mentally stunted, deformed, and poor. Yeah. Viper says he's a type of person who thinks you can cook a turkey at 900 for 1 hour rather than 300 for 3 hours. Yeah, I think that's a good analogy here. They think you can just do things faster, and that inherently makes it better. It's no, that's not how things work. Again, this is what I was saying earlier. Aristotle is smarter than most people. I don't know why. Was it born? Did he work unbelievably hard to get that smart? But again, Just because we have all these stuff, that doesn't mean people are going to have the discipline to work and to study. Now, some of us do. Some of us work very hard. I know that. But like, again, time, circumstances, and all sorts of things. All right, I haven't even got to number 5 yet. Okay, as the world is now richer and safer, budding philosophers have a much greater chance of being able to devote their time to philosophical training and understanding. I don't know if that's true. Instead of being trapped in subsistence farming or political intrigue. Yeah, well, this was probably written last year. Political intrigue and like war are back on the table, and so I'm not sure about that. 5, insofar as philosophy is a constructive endeavor on prior work. Yes, Shane. We have the benefit of 2,000 years of subsequent philosophy that Plato could never access. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Plato might have had some easier times. Some might have had some easier time. But there were pre-Socratics. There were ancient stories that they had. And they were working with that stuff. And so you don't actually know what they had. So the idea that they've had 2,000 years of we've had 2,000 years of subsequent philosophy. Well, maybe Plato had 2,000 years before them, and so maybe that was just like the way things were back then. It doesn't really mean anything, this. But yeah, again, it's just God. Again, with the internal contradictions. 6. Insofar as philosophical understanding can be informed by other fields, that is, natural sciences and linguistics, the much greater development of these are now also advantages. Oh, absolutely. 7. Technology allows us to have much wider and easier access to our peers and philosophical work. Yes, we have internets. Okay. What philosophical historians are ultimately committing to is the idea that extremely small and underdeveloped societies with highly exclusive privileges of access to the relevant resources have produced much better philosophers than extremely large, globally interconnected, and much more inclusive societies. Yeah. Shane says, I'm building on the foundation of historical philosophy. I don't know what it is, and it's not important to read, but it's the reason my philosophy is prima facie better than in the foundations. Yeah. I mean, that's basically, let's like la 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 la. It's just mine's better. We're not talking about any of that stuff in the past. This seems highly improbable that people in the past were smarter than some of the people today. It's like, no, this is not highly improbable. It's that we have more information doesn't give us more insight. More information does not imply more insight. Look at the morons today. There's more morons too. But if I am right, as the author, and the distribution of philosophical qualities should, statistically speaking, be much more even-handed, then where are all the philosophical geniuses hiding? On Twitch, clearly. Speaking of, there we go. Here's where they are. Go check out Aristotle, Evolve Yourself, and if you want, Ask a Philosopher, although they haven't been streaming as much lately. And Shane, too, who we shouted out earlier. Where are the present-day Ibn Rushd? Who is that? Ibn Rushd. Can't remember the Latinized name. The current Plotins and Feuerbachs, the contemporary Anselms, Brentanos, Schellings, and the living, the breathing Moors and Montaignes. There aren't any, and this is probably a good thing. The existence of towering geniuses is almost always a sign that a discipline is still in the early stages of development and hasn't reached the stage of maturity yet. Oh, so they're saying philosophy's done, and you want to know where it ends? It ends with this person. That's how these arguments always go, where philosophy's mature and that they have it right, and that's why you should listen to them. Mature disciplines are characterized by a state of the art in their debates that simply cannot be overseen or dominated by a single mind. The absence of philosophical prodigies, rather than being evidence of a decline, actually means that we've made it. Okay, we can stop right there. I usually think that there are no philosophical prodigies in general. You could actually argue that Saul Kripke, who just died a week ago, or whatever it is, on Thursday, he was publishing in high school. He was publishing modal logic papers in high school. So if you want to say that there was no child geniuses, you're going to have to argue with the people that say Kripke was. And Kripke just died. So maybe no one since Kripke, but again, the distribution of talent, maybe we only get one every a generation or so. Oh, the final prophet argument? I didn't know it had a name, but I've seen it a bunch of times. So it's just pointed out. A discipline that frequently produces singular geniuses hasn't left its earlier phase of relative inchoateness. They use the word inchoateness. Seriously? inchoateness yet. Serendipity may occasionally wrestle another Gauss or Einstein from the claws of non-existence. Yeah, but like physics... Yeah, like, see, they're arguing that physics is special here. But, like, again, Einstein died not that long ago in, like, terms of, like, the history of stuff. But physics has been a mature discipline for a while, if you want to argue that. So, but in general, modern scientific disciplines are so far developed to be beyond individual mastery. The list containing the most influential philosophers could be a simple statement of fact. Plato was de facto much more influential than any living person ever had the chance of becoming, since he had much more ample time to acquire such influence. Yeah, but again, you're comparing someone 2,000 years ago to someone today. We may have someone today that in 2,000 years is going to be of comparable influence. We just don't know who they are because you need the time to figure this out. The author here is using a double standard. You can see that with Plato. You can't see that with anyone today because we don't have foresight into 2,000 years into the future. Indisputably true? I just said it was false. But it doesn't amount to a defense of philosophical historiography. If anything, it shows the opposite, namely that the attention historical authors receive today is unlikely to be due to epistemically relevant considerations and rather due to grace of an earlier birth. Of course they have, like, there's going to be more references to things that came earlier. That is how we do our measurements. Are these good measurements, though, of philosophical quality? Is reference lists a good proxy? I'm not sure. Perhaps the above list need not reflect unwarranted historicist prejudices as much as survivorship bias. Yeah, that's fair. Now, the planes that return from battle need not be better planes, they are simply the ones that happen to make it back to the shore. But in the case of philosophy, the surprising density of philosophical quality in the past may be an illusion created by the fact that only the highest quality tends to be preserved and passed down. Yeah, that is something that it's the bias of the time and books got lost, and so then you're getting survivorship bias. Yeah. And this is one of the reasons that, like, you know, female philosophers get ignored is because their books didn't get passed down. What is this? Okay, something else. From Vipers. Okay. Bad philosophers always existed, but we don't know about them anymore because they were so bad. This surely plays a role in explaining the historically skewed pattern, but it doesn't address the central question. The same mechanisms of survival bias are in play in any scientific discipline, but philosophy remains unique in combining epistemic pretenses with a deeply historical approach. Many people will think that comparing philosophy to other non-philosophical disciplines such as physics or mathematics is misguided. Yes, it is. It's not the same thing. But note that similar asymmetries can be found intramurally as well. Most philosophical historicists implicitly concede that older philosophical contributions are likely to be less epistemically valuable, since historians of philosophy spend very little time studying old work in the history of philosophy. Yes, but epistemically valuable is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about philosophical quality, not knowing more stuff. You don't study the history of philosophy for knowledge. Again, but like, see, this is just a misguided argument on their part. So they've missed their own point here. People generally engage much more intensively with recent scholarly literature on, say, the philosophy of Kant or Hegel, rather than historical secondary literature. In fact, few people even know about the works of Jakob Friedrich Fries, Johann Friedrich Herbart, Hermann Cohen, Karl Rosenkranz, Kuno Fischer, Julius Ebbinghaus, Hahn Weihinger, or others. It is not clear why the epistemic value of secondary philosophical literature should deteriorate so much more quickly than the epistemic value of the primary philosophical literature. The fact that it does suggests that much of the philosophical historiography is just philosophical hagiography. I mean, it's of the nature. If you're talking about something else, the something else is going to be the thing that gets preserved. But yeah. Yeah, like, why don't the secondary literature is not trying to, a lot of times is also doing something else. If you're trying to write philosophy is one thing. If you're trying to explain someone else's philosophy, that's something else. I mean, you're doing exposition. And so, again, this is like sort of missing their own point here. Exposition is not, like, it might be excellent work, but again, if you're not doing the philosophy, people aren't going to read that as philosophy. They're going to read it as exposition. And again, that as a separate thing, people do get better at exposition. The root argument of this passage, just because we don't preserve 100% of things, none of it matters. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. This is completely missing the point. of their own argument. What counts as good philosophy, what people save as good philosophy, like, that's what we have. But, like, it's just is wrong because, of course, a lot of stuff gets missed, and, you know, we try to repair our history when we realize that certain people were doing good philosophy, and it still has value to us, and it has maybe sociological value too. Like, you know, if like there were some female authors of the past that deserve their place in history, then, like, you know, that's a sociological thing. They deserve I keep saying sociological too much, but I mean, it's like they deserve their place in the history of philosophy. And maybe they have something useful to say, but like maybe we just have to look a little harder because they do have things that are good to say. Historical. All right, how did we get here? And so they're going to talk about the mistakes of history now. Historical philosophers get far too much credit, but why? Let me offer some possible explanations here. I believe that each of these has a good deal of plausibility, though I am not confident that they are the correct ones. Much of what I have to say in this section will remain fairly speculative. Shane says, if I steal your wallet and it has $100 in it, and I take 50 from it and give you the wallet back, you don't burn the remaining 50 because it's not 100. Yeah, that's silly. Viper says, I should have been a philosopher. I think that I had a better idea about optimized epistemological narratives and was able to express it in a chat message instead of 26 fucking pages. Yeah. I mean, don't count yourself out, Vipers. You could, you know, go ahead and write something one day and it might be, you know, write a book. People do that, you know, eventually. And it mentioned weed. Yeah, so bonus points. Yeah, and it was entertaining and mentioned weed. Yeah, I mean, you can do good work and, like, not be a professional philosopher. And, like, or, you know, people do write books when they get older, like, when they have a little bit more time on their hands. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but, like, you know, when people get time on their hands, sometimes they sit down, they write themselves a nice book, and people like it. It's like, that does happen. One possible explanation, yeah, and just because you're good at this does not mean you're going to be a good philosopher, or at least a paid philosopher. Like, I'm not a paid philosopher here. I mean, you can give me some bits on Twitch, but, like, this is not going to pay me anything, like, significant here. So it's like, you can be good at this stuff, but, like, being a good academic is a different thing. Shane says, you should just be ahistorical, and you should send this guy your paper, and when he shits on it, you should just send him back his own paper back and tell him to shut up. Yeah. It's like, oh, that was in the past. You're a dick. Like, you don't, what you say doesn't matter because you're not on the cutting edge of epistemology. That is kind of funny. This guy, like, would have to be like, well, you're not on the cutting edge of philosophy. The more I think about that, it's really elitist in today's world. I mean, they even mentioned it, but, like, it's getting, it's rubbing me the wrong way. Okay, one sec. Yeah, we're getting close to the 2.5 hour mark on this, but we're almost done. Alright, so what is the explanation? Why are things the way they are now? One possible explanation for the undue epistemic credit received by the great philosophers of the past has to do with how our minds evolved. Oh my god, making an evolutionary psychology argument. Current evolutionary psychology stresses the importance of social learning for cultural evolution. In order to build up a cumulative reservoir of complex practices, skills, traditions, and information, human beings must be able to transmit information horizontally. Individuals must be able to learn from each other, but how do we decide whom to learn from? In many cases, acquiring information from older individuals will be an extremely useful heuristic. Quote, once we became a sufficiently cultural species, capable of selectively focusing on and learning from certain models, older individuals often emerged as important information resources. By opening the informational floodgates between generations, cultural transmission changes the relationship between younger and older individuals. By contrast, in non-cultural species, not only is the information accumulated by older individuals limited to what they can acquire through their own experience, but it's also of little consequence to others since they usually lack the psychological abilities to obtain it. Thus, in species with cultural learning, while aging individuals may be physically declining, they still possess transmittable know-how that makes them increasingly valuable to younger generations. This accumulated knowledge may explain why the elderly are prestigious in most, if not all, traditional societies. Yeah, people know shit, and it means, and it's not so clear that it's like scientific knowledge. It's other kinds of knowledge that don't just get built up easily. Saying things clearly so people learn it is not like scientific stuff like listing facts. Okay, author says, the disproportionate testimonial weight given to past philosophers could be a case where an otherwise justified psychological mechanism misfires. Okay, I guess what I just was saying was learning matters, but like, again, this author wasn't wanting to get away from that, so I don't want to, that would be wrong on the author's lights. So just because it's good at teaching doesn't make it good philosophy. That's fair. But, all right, what they're saying is, we have a psychological mechanism that is misfiring. We're just, have a love for the ancients that is just stupid. Our evolved prestige psychology simply isn't equipped to deal with an environment of culturally archived immortality. It makes sense to learn from older people because they tend to possess a great deal of useful knowledge, but when our heuristics of social learning are placed in an environment populated by individuals whose opinions have been embalmed by cultural techniques such as writing and printing, they start to lead us astray. As a result, we think we are opening a precious message in a bottle, but end up drinking the Kool-Aid. Yes, that's right, Shane. This person is making up some random speculative shit that we are confused about very old dead people and then like our grandparents. So like I somehow thought Plato was my grandpa and I should listen to him. I mean, that's unfair to the author, but not entirely unfair. They're saying like we're psychologically confused that stuff in books is like our grandparents. Viper's Gratitude says, during the Industrial Revolution and the rise of the middle class, there was a consequent rise in academic elitism, hence books like Joyce's Ulysses. In your experience, has there been a similar elitist impulse in response to the internet's democratization of knowledge? Yes. One of the things that has happened was there's a lot of stuff. I'm sure you've noticed that I don't read certain papers because I don't have access to them. And I don't have access to them because I do not have an academic affiliation. And so basically the elitist impulse, a lot of this stuff is that things are paywalled now. And so people who have access are definitely elitist. Like the fancier schools have access to all the latest research. I don't. There's a lot of people that don't. And you can tell that there have been rejections. I've heard of people getting papers rejected and saying, oh, this recapitulates something in an unpublished manuscript by a big philosopher. And it's like, well, I didn't have access to that. Well, people have reading circles, and so people knew about unpublished work by big philosophers, and they wouldn't let someone else scoop a big philosopher. So it's like these things, like weird things are happening with the internet, and so there are some elitist responses about paywalling and reading groups and things like that. Shane says yes and no. There's been an anti-intellectualist impulse in the population as independent voices get the same weight, but academia is just built a higher tower. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's a better answer than mine. But that's what I was saying. The higher tower they were building was paywalling this stuff and stuff like that. So, and my voice is starting to go. Yeah, so there's also other reasons for paywalls and stuff, but I think what Shane said is probably better than what I said. Okay. Oh, yeah, Shane, I can usually circumvent things. There are plenty of ways to circumvent the paywalls. I don't do it on purpose just as sort of a fuck you. I do circumvent it somewhat nowadays more than I used to, but part of the thing when I started this out, I never did it, and I made a point of being like, well, I'm not reading your paper if you didn't make it available, and I can't. But yeah, I usually can, go to the hub of science or whatever and find it. And for TOS purposes, I don't suggest anyone ever do the things I do. Viper says, I think that anti-intellectualism is driven more by the media than active intent by the population. They're just running on autopilot. Controversy creates talking points, and talking points sell. Yeah, thank you, Valpo. No, the reasons for it are probably, you're right, Vipers, but again, it goes back to like human psychology. The people want to feel special who have power, and so the people in like academia, what do they do to feel special? Well, they have to wall themselves off even higher, and so yes, the media is exacerbating the problem, but it was always there. Shane says no, you can promise that the anti-intellectualism is self-driven. That's interesting. I do suspect there is media fanning the flames, but if you think it's more that people are just angry with intellectualism, like why? Why do you think it's self-driven? Why are people that driven to be anti-intellectual? Like that seems weird that they care. Okay, a second possible explanation to why old philosophers are important, it comes down to publication bias. Your anti-intellectualism is driven by my philosophy roulette. I'm not surprised that that's a consequence, but then again, I'm a very odd person, and the fact that I do what I do and just like shoot down philosophy is unusual. So I'm stranger than you know. So like that I do this here is maybe you've got a what's it called? You've got a selection bias by what you've looked at, and if you looked at somebody else being like, oh no, philosophy is great, you wouldn't think that all of this shit's bullshit. Okay, a second possible explanation comes down to publication bias. Humor, I think I know this guy, or I've read some of his work before. Regardless of how much of what we find in the great philosophical works makes sense, it seems clear that the significant philosophers of the past also said an enormous amount of blatantly false and risible things. So why do they continue to attract so much attention? One possibility is that we study great philosophical works not to spite, but because they contain so many preposterous claims. Great philosophers are the most influential philosophers, and the most influential philosophers are the ones that are most talked about. So these are the meme lords, is what they're saying. They've come up with the most laughable things. But only the most outrageous theories get talked about a lot because of publication bias. Sexy research results with grand claims that defy common sense, such as SAS percipi, that's seeing is to be, perceived is to be, there is no self, no one knows anything, and so on, attract attention, while common sense truths such as it is often difficult to control one's behavior, generate much less buzz. Yes, there is something to this, but the problem is no one is arguing that it's difficult to control one's behavior. It means nothing to anyone. It doesn't fucking matter because everyone already knows that. The whole point of philosophy is dealing with hard problems, and like the idea that like and people who say weird things about hard problems are much more interesting and why they say it than people who are saying everything stuff that everyone agrees with, which is completely uninteresting. Shane says, the explanation for that is long, but I've had to boil it down. People build their personal identities around objective falsehoods and then refuse to acknowledge facts when they challenge those core beliefs. This engenders the development of knee-jerk, anti-smart people reactions. Fair. But that's just saying people are bitter, which I guess is true. But I would also say people are bitter because society's kind of crap at the moment. And so I'd say yes, but like it's because, you know, society's kind of crap at the moment that people are kind of bitter. They'd be more willing to, you know, try out more ideas if, you know, they had more money and time as opposed to struggling to make rent. So yeah, I think I kind of agree with you, but I kind of think that there might be like it's being exacerbated again by society. But yeah, it makes sense what you say at least. Thirdly, historically influential philosophers remain influential because people are adverse to sunk costs. This is definitely something I doubt that people are actually. This is actually the case with like no one reads Plato because of sunk costs. They just would stop. But yeah. Once a group of people has invested time and energy into studying something, they acquire an incentive to rationalize its importance. Soon it becomes psychologically increasingly prohibitive to recognize one's hermeneutical investments as a waste of time. This entrenches a recalcitrant equilibrium that, since people teach what they know, perpetuates itself from one philosophical generation to the next. Yeah, there are bitter philosophers too. Then they're like, oh, this is stupid, but this is what I teach and this is how I get paid. That's fair, but I don't think, the one thing about this is that you don't realize, this author I think is just young and does not realize that you can actually keep defending dying theories forever, basically. And if you are willing to dig your heels in, you can keep defending the theories. You can just do it. Like, it's really hard, but you can be really smart about it. And if you're really smart, you can do it. And so this is one of the things that happens. People dig their heels in and they get into these weird positions. And, sometimes something new comes out of that. That a lot of times, this is how philosophy happens. People dig themselves in really stupid ways. This is, I think, how religious philosophy works a lot of times. People are stuck with ideas that don't really work from the history of religion, or like religious texts that don't make sense. But then they have to struggle so hard to make sense of it that they do come up with something new. This is a way to do philosophy. Just because you have a sunk cost doesn't mean that you're not getting anywhere. It may mean that, like, what the old theory is bad, that doesn't mean the new theory that's coming out of it is. Shane says, I didn't say it wasn't influenced by society. In many cases, it was put there by society to begin with, but the desire to preserve a personal identity in the face of a threat is an internal drive. Completely agree. Maybe we're just coming at this from other different sides, and so it's like we're basically in agreement about that. Okay, conclusion. Yeah, so same with Vipers. Conclusion. Oh my God, we have dying. We have good reasons for thinking that historical authors were deeply wrong about almost everything. No, we don't. We have statistical reasons for thinking that the best philosophers live now. No, we don't. Rather in the past. And we judge historical authors by much too lenient standards. No, we don't. Given that we could be studying contemporary philosophers who are much less likely to be wrong about much fewer things, I disagree with that too. That we must rationally assume that more of these philosophers live today than in the past. Nope. Over the entire history of the past, again, that goes to the statistics, but I'm not sure that that even works out either. And that we judge currently working philosophers much more harshly than historical ones. Doubt that. I suggest that when it comes to satisfying the epistemic aims of philosophy, we ought to spend much less time studying the history of philosophy. Maybe a bit less. I agree with that. The deliberate historical ignorance I recommend seems to assume that philosophy has a vindicatory history. We are only entitled to move past historically significant authors if the history of philosophy is a success story. Firstly, however, it would be extremely implausible to suggest that there are no philosophical successes whatsoever, that is, that over the course of the history of philosophy no one has ever learned anything at all. Moreover, if philosophy were in no way a success story, there would be hardly any reason for studying it in the first place, except perhaps as a literary phenomenon. If you met Hanno Sauer, would you grab him by the neck, rub the top of his head with your knuckles, and say, "This fucking guy"? You know what? Again, Vipers, like I said, I was much more similar to this in the past. He might be an okay person, just as a person. There's a difference between being a shitty philosopher and a bad person. There's a lot of shitty philosophers that are okay people, and there are a lot of okay people that are shitty philosophers. What'd I say? The other way around too. So it's it might be fun, for all I know. I disagree with them, but I disagree with a huge number of people in philosophy. So it's if I had to agree with everyone in philosophy and in order to be friends with them, I wouldn't be friends with Aristotle. Oh, well, he might be a shitty person based on his pictures, but again, maybe he's better now than he was. Shane says, I'm a shitty philosopher and I don't think I'm the worst person in the world ever. I mean, I'm an asshole, but I'm a sort of benign one. Yeah, again, if I were to judge people on, personally on their philosophical ability, that would be terrible. And so, again, maybe this person's a scummy person. They seem a little, suspect based on what we've read here today. But again, maybe, they're growing up and they'll learn better in the future. So if I run into this person in 2 years, maybe they'll be yeah, that was a very immature paper I wrote and I feel like I'm kind of sorry about it now, but I got something out of it. It's like, that would be a reasonable thing for someone to say in like a few years. But yeah, they deserve to be, I think all the criticisms we've been leveling against this paper are all like good criticisms, and should have been like, someone should have like sat this person down and been like, look, what you're saying doesn't actually work, and you've got internal inconsistencies in your argument too. So even if what we're saying doesn't work, what you're saying really doesn't work. Like, you can disagree with the history of philosophy, but they're at least more consistent than you are. Don't say that in front of Cinesemiotics. Cinesemiotics would be like, I'm gonna kill them. Okay. Yeah, Orson Welles. Talk about a person, though. What was it? There's a great quote by an Orson Welles a friend of Orson Welles. They once said that Orson Welles could quote them on any topic at any time. And just like anything Orson Welles could attribute to them anything they wanted. Like, just if Orson... So, it's like the idea was, if Orson said it, it was good enough for me. Alright. Let me get to the end of this, or try. Then again, my argument seems to rely on a particular picture of what it means to do philosophy. Yes, it does. Very narrow, in fact. According to this... You don't like the story. Okay, the cinematography is great. Fair. According to this picture, there is a certain set of philosophical problems that remain largely the same. Over time, we get better and better at developing solutions to these problems, such that it makes sense to focus on whatever the most recent solutions are. But as Rorty and others have pointed out, when did Rorty die? Richard Rorty is not alive. What we see as philosophical problem, and which problems belong on the list, are themselves questions with a historical origin, and in order to understand that origin, we must understand the genesis of those problems. And there is surely some truths to this line of thought. Many philosophical problems on the agenda today only make sense in a particular historical context. Many others not on the agenda have simply been forgotten about, often for reasons that are difficult to understand. But we also shouldn't exaggerate this point. There is a large number of philosophical topics, such as the existence of God or free will, the possibility of knowledge or moral responsibility, the relationship between the physical and the mental and the individual in society, that are not as discontinuous as the Rortian picture suggests. At the very least, my argument would apply to philosophical endeavors concerning those perennial problems. Again, this person does not understand what it means to be contemporary. People need new ideas, and all the stuff that's getting published right now does not have all the ideas. There were ideas in the past too that we have not fully fleshed out. The claim that historical philosophers have little of value to contribute to contemporary philosophy may seem disrespectful or even ungrateful to some, but I think the opposite is the case, that the historiography of philosophy, its Historia Rerum Gestarum, is especially philosophically significant, amounts to the thesis that the history of philosophy, its res gestae, was philosophically insignificant. To say that the great philosophers of the past remain relevant today is tantamount to saying that they have accomplished nothing of lasting value, that in effect there are no giants on whose shoulders we can stand. Physicists do not keep studying Newton's Principia precisely because of what he has accomplished. The best way of respecting Newton is to ignore him, or more precisely, to ignore his own writings in favor of the lasting results he produced, the substance of which can be paraphrased and taught because the progress engendered by his work allows us to. The cure I am recommending is a healthy dose of historical amnesia to counterbalance the burden imposed by the weight of history. This cure was famously prescribed a long time ago by Nietzsche, one of history's greatest philosophers, in his 1874 Untimely Meditations, which is ironic. Viper says, the point is that it has... Oh, you're talking about Citizen Kane. This person is just like so self-unaware. Like the fact that like their point just reiterates Nietzsche. Like, why didn't you just go fucking read Nietzsche? Or write a paper on Nietzsche instead of writing this weird fucking paper where you seem to not appreciate history and then and then you just go back to repeating something from 1874. It's not ironic. It's again, it contradicts your thesis here that the history of philosophy is useless because you could have read this a lot earlier than you probably have, and you've just reiterated things in Nietzsche and you haven't said anything fucking new. And so your contemporary philosophy, where you're trying to say, oh, the new stuff has all the old stuff. No, you just had the old stuff. You didn't say anything new. You're never like, oh. Yeah, Shane. Like that's exactly right. They use like the rhetorical post hoc thought, and it just fucking again disagrees with the whole paper. It's like rain on your wedding day. It's like shitty philosophy paper. Yeah, isn't it ironic? Oh. Oh, this is interesting. There's a Horizon 2020. I wonder who this Horizon people are. Wow. You know, this is a wow paper. Like, wow. It just feels immature to me, is what it does. They made their argument. They're a highly technically skilled philosopher, and they basically buried all their mistakes in like, nice reasoning. But like that doesn't make it right, and it got it through the review process. Okay, but like. Valpo owes you 3 hours. Yeah, well, or a little 2 hours, but yeah, like this was well written. Like I didn't have too much time reading it. But yeah, I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say at this point. And I'm also kind of losing my mind. It's getting towards the 3 hour mark. Well, I mean, by my clock, I've been live almost 2 hours 50 minutes. So, yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to say. If there's any questions, let me know. I'm just like, starting to go, my brain. Yeah, it's just too many internal inconsistencies. Too many just like, they're acting like there's gotchas here, but like the gotchas really come back to bite the author. Like it just does not. Yeah, see, this is what I pointed out. A philosopher makes a discovery, then later finds out something similar had been suggested earlier. And guess what? That's exactly what happened here. And then we just wasted 3 hours. And I don't know how long this took the author to write this. But it's like, yeah, why didn't you just go try to think of something better than Nietzsche said? You just repeated Nietzsche here. And you did not say anything better than what Nietzsche said. The weird thing here is that this paper got featured on Daily News, which doesn't usually feature random papers. I think, did they say they were doing like a new series where they're featuring random papers? But again, what's funny about this is that again they were criticizing the right up here the what was it, the being like just saying something outrageous, and that's why people are like the more outrageous you say something, then like the more play it gets. This person said something kind of outrageous, and therefore it got more play. And I think that's why Daily News might have taken it, because they thought it might spark some discussion. Which is what a blog was doing. I think I mentioned this earlier, but this could get the analytic continental divide debate again, like stirred up. Maybe that was part of the idea, because continental philosophy is more historically oriented, and so maybe they were thinking that this has got like an analytic bent to it. Maybe we can get some continentals justifying historically oriented philosophy. Yeah, that's true. So, apologetics on Valpo's part here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know like what the comments are on Daily News were looking like. That's a great question, Vipers. The most fertile ground. I mean, depends what you want to do. Actually, philosophy is big. It's got a big history. What do you want to do with it? Like, I write my papers. That's where I see like the stuff I want to do. But like that doesn't make it like the most fertile ground. Like depends on your skill set too. Like I can't write ethics. You go talk to our friend Aristotle if you want to talk about someone who thinks like things can be done in ethics. I just don't do them. So it's like again once you get past the like very immature view that like you get smart and then you can do like all sorts of things. No, what happens is you get smart, like, but people are different, and so we have different skills and like we have like different abilities, and so it's not going to be the same for everyone. It's like I do my stuff. It's like, yeah, you want to go write some analytic philosophy on like epistemology, like my paper, my Wittgenstein's wager. You want to go read some philosophy of a Wittgensteinian epistemology. Is like, there, I wrote that paper and I got published. So like I think that's good. You can go look at that stuff. But like it's gonna matter again what you want to do. Like, you know how to program, you could go look at some technical philosophy and maybe you'd find that interesting, and that would be a good area for you, but it's not going to be good area for other people. And like philosophy is just very big, and once you start realizing how smart some of these people are that are working in areas you don't like and how sophisticated their arguments are, then you realize like you can do stuff anywhere, but like again, it's hard to say. Yeah, like this is just so funny that again they just contradicted themselves, and you get like once you get past the stupid positivistic view that things are just going in like a straight line and building like science. That's not how philosophy works, and you don't know the history of philosophy if that's how you think it works, and it's just wrong. It's the wrong view of things. So okay. Did I have to do anything else for this paper? I don't think so. No, this is, I'm pretty sure this person's an analytic philosopher. Like, they wouldn't understand what postmodernism is about. Or I doubt they would. Because, again, postmodernism is more of a continental topic. And so they wouldn't, even postmodernist, that's a historically oriented term. It's after the moderns, which, ended up in, the 1800s or whatever that the modern period was. That's already a historically termed that's a historically engineered term. And so technically yes, but the subscribing to the postmodern school, then no. All right. Is there anyone out there to raid? Because I don't think my voice will last for another paper. The end of philosophy, this is. Oh, let's go raid Anne. Okay. Quickie. All right, so let's go head over to say hi to Anne. Anne's our friend. Anne was an academic and decided, probably smartly, get out of Dodge. And, yeah. Whoa, are we not going to do raids today? Huh. Tell me if you see the raid message come up, because it did not come up on my side. That's interesting, but yeah, not seeing it. Yeah. Did I misspell it? No, I copied it off the fucking webpage. Yeah, it's not going through. Let's try host then. Maybe we'll do a host. Host is going away. Thank you. Yeah, but analytic philosophers are trying to take some style notes from the continental philosophers, and so just because they look like a postmodernist doesn't mean they talk like one. All right. Well, it's busted. I'm sorry. I can't really do it. That's fair. That's a very nice way to do it. Okay. I can't read. I don't know how... what else to do, because it's just not working. So I thank you all for being here. I'm sorry if this paper rubbed you the wrong way. This is like philosophy when you're immature, but you're ridiculously smart, but you don't have a good sense. You haven't got, you don't have a sense of history. You don't have a sense of place. You don't actually know what a contemporary debate is, because the contemporary debate reaches into the past. You don't actually understand the words contemporary in history because they're political, and you don't realize you're drawing lines that you have assumed from the history of philosophy that you don't actually haven't really critically understood yet. This is what happens when you don't understand the words you are saying. You end up contradicting yourself and making an ass of yourself. He has a book called Debunking Arguments in Ethics. Yeah, but keep in mind you're giving him money in that case. You could just send him cash. Let him suffer too. He's probably been lurking, to tell you the truth. He usually lurks. I don't check my lurks, but like he's probably lurking. So he suffered along with us. Yeah. This is the sort of thing. You're going, like, people who go around doing debunking arguments, sometimes it's worthwhile, but a lot of times you're just saying, no, you're wrong about stuff, and you're not giving anything useful. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry I can't raid out, but it's just busted. So have a great night, everyone.